Chapter 29:14. I'll definitely find you. Then, we'll be together for the rest of our lives, okay? Yin Shirshir lost control of her tears. She broke down completely and cried bitterly. Gu Xingze, who was on the screen, seemed to have telepathy. He said frantically, "Don't cry." He said uneasily, "I'm most afraid of your tears. Don't cry, okay? We might still have the chance to meet in the future. After a few years, I'll have let go of this relationship. Maybe I'll appear in front of you with a new attitude. Actually, you don't have to be sad. I didn't know how to fight for it. Since I was young, I've never experienced what kinship and love are. I don't have any special feelings about marriage. At first, I didn't know if this hazy feeling I had for you was love or just a senior taking care of a junior. But later on, I realized that love can really be like a tornado, disrupting one's heartbeat. If I had known that this was love, I would have hugged you without hesitation. But it's all too late." Yin Shirshir covered her face and was sobbing uncontrollably. For the past few days, the dark and gloomy emotions that had accumulated in her chest seemed to have finally been released. Like a flash flood, it broke through the floodgates and became a disaster. No one knew that such an accident would happen. Moreover, no one knew that at this very moment, every word that he said to her, which seemed to be a casual farewell, was piercing her heart. Muyaja stood quietly beside the television and leaned against the wall. His handsome eyebrows were slightly furrowed as he watched everything quietly. He didn't stop her from crying. She had suppressed her emotions for so long. She needed to release them after all. But no one could make her release her emotions. Besides Gu Xingze, there was no one else. He was the one who was troubling her. In order to cure her, Muyaja could only think of this way. Muyaja glanced at the man on the screen. It was Gu Xingze's thin figure sitting in front of the camera. His face looked a little pale. Perhaps it was because of the damage to his body that made it difficult for him to maintain his best condition in front of her. He looked extremely weak. There was a thick shadow on his eyelids. Before he decided to leave the entertainment industry, he recorded this video as his final farewell to her. If this accident had not happened, he would probably be in a foreign country right now. And this video would be his last gift to her, given to her by Qin Zhou. However, who would have thought that the final farewell would be a final farewell? Yin Shirshir cried like a child in despair. Gu Xingze's voice was as light as a feather. "Thank you for appearing in my life, Shirshir." For 2 whole days, Yin Shirshir stayed in front of the TV, watching Gu Xingze's last video over and over again as if she had lost her soul. She didn't get tired of listening to it over and over again. She wanted to hear more of his voice. She missed him so much that she fell ill. She had so many things to say to him, but he couldn't hear her anymore. Her emotions were running rampant, and no one could cure her. She hugged the memory disk and listened to Gu Xingze's voice, as if she didn't know what fatigue was. Chapter 29:15. Gong Jie and Muyaja took turns to watch over her. Every night, Gong Jie and Muyaja would coax her again and again before she would obediently return to bed to rest. However, she still could not bear to turn off the television. She was afraid that if she turned it off, she would never hear his voice again. She knew that whether it was guilt or longing, it was time to let go. He was gone and no longer existed. These videos were also fake. They didn't exist. Gu Xingze was no longer there. However, every time she woke up and heard his voice, she would feel at ease. Everything seemed to have been bewitched. She still refused to eat. She would only occasionally drink some water and eat some fruits, even if it was just a little. Compared to her previous zombie-like state, everyone felt gratified and satisfied. At least, she was willing to try to eat. However, Yu was extremely worried. How long would this mental state last? Xiao Shui also came to the hospital to visit her once. Gong Jie did not let her in to disturb her, so she could only stand at the door and watch her from afar. Yin Shirshir's mental state was not good. Therefore, not many people knew that she was hospitalized. Muyaja protected her very well. He did not let anyone disturb her, nor did he let anyone disturb her recuperation. Xiao Shui was her best friend. When she heard the news, she insisted on coming over to take a look. However, when she stood at the door and saw her in a daze in front of the television from afar, Her heart ached so much that tears streamed down her face. How did she become like this? Xiao Shui was extremely heartbroken. Has she been refusing to eat? Yu nodded painfully. Mommy has been refusing to eat. She can only rely on the nutrient solution to maintain her energy. Xiao Shui gritted her teeth. She was extremely upset. Gong Jie stood at the balcony, feeling extremely depressed. He turned around and glanced at Yin Shirshir. He sighed heavily. Looking at her haggard appearance, Gong Jie's heart was about to bleed. At this moment, the doctor suddenly came into the ward. When Mu Yaja saw him, he stood up and walked towards him. What's the situation? Mr. Mu, why don't you take your wife for a detailed prenatal checkup? His sudden words reminded Mu Yaja that it was time for a prenatal checkup. He returned to the ward, held Yun Shirshir's shoulder, and asked gently, Shirshir, I'll take you for a checkup, okay? It's been so long. I wonder how the little fellow is doing. The doctor said that we have to do regular checkups. Yin Shirshir nodded in confusion. The nurse pushed the wheelchair over. Mu Yaja carried her onto the wheelchair and pushed her to do a checkup. After half a day, all kinds of examinations were done. Mu Yaja pushed Yin Shirshir to the doctor's office. The doctor was looking at the ultrasound report. At 9 weeks of pregnancy, the fetus has grown to 15 centimeters. The head of the fetus is larger than the body of the fetus, and the various parts are clearer. The head has begun to calcify, and the placenta has begun to develop. The ultrasound shows that the fetal sac almost fills the uterine cavity. The outline of the fetus is clearer, and the placenta is beginning to appear. After the doctor finished speaking, he said, Sai, this is really troublesome. If she refuses to eat for a long time, it might affect the development of the fetus. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Chapter 29:16. Yin Shirshir's eyes, which were initially emotionless, flickered a little when she heard this. Her eyes finally regained some focus. How's the little guy now? The little guy is very strong and there's nothing unusual. However, if this goes on, it will definitely have many adverse effects on her body and the child. The doctor paused for a moment and said, even if the child survives in the mother's body, its innate resistance will be weaker after birth. If the mother's mood changes drastically during pregnancy, it will easily cause the child's personality to become sensitive. But I'm worried that if this goes on, the fetus will stop developing and might even have a miscarriage. Miscarriage? Mu Yaja's expression was tense. Isn't there a nutrient solution? This doesn't constitute sufficient nutrition at all. Moreover, emotional fluctuations are also a huge factor. The doctor placed the B-scan film on the backlight. He pointed at a very small ball in the film and said to him, This is the fetus. It's developing normally and is very strong. A normal little guy won't be able to last until this time. Mu Yaja stared at the small ball and pursed his lips. His eyes couldn't help but redden. That was his child. Who knew? It might be a beautiful little princess. He had always wanted to have a daughter with her. However, now that this child had fallen from the sky, he felt that this was probably the most beautiful gift that God had given him. But why was it that when he wanted to protect her, he felt a great sense of powerlessness? Mu Yaja suddenly turned around and leaned over slightly. He held her shoulders and asked carefully, Shirshir, did you hear that? Did you hear that? If you don't eat properly and don't rest normally, and keep torturing yourself like this, the child will die sooner or later. Yin Shirshir suddenly widened her eyes and her pupils contracted violently. She looked at him but could only see a barren land. The child. The little guy in your stomach, 9 weeks, she's still so small. Still so small. She's been developing strongly. But his heart ached as he pulled her into his embrace. Over the past few days he had been suffering as well. For her, and even more for the child in her stomach, how could he not be on tenterhooks? At every moment he was in fear. Enough. Was that enough? Even if it's a punishment, shouldn't it stop now? A hot teardrop fell onto her cheek. Mu Yaja hugged her back neck. For the first time in his life, a man who had always been proud and aloof, shed tears in front of her. Stop torturing yourself, okay? You can torture me or punish me. Stop torturing yourself. He choked with sobs and said, Sure, I love you so much, and I also love this little guy in your belly. Don't torture yourself anymore. Look at me, look at me. He held her face and forced her to look at him. It doesn't matter how you punish me. The child is innocent. Please don't punish her, okay? His voice was hoarse and desperate for her response. What he got in return was a teardrop falling from her eyes. Muyaja hugged her tightly. I can't lose you, and I can't lose her. I don't know what to do with you. Wake up, wake up. He begged her uncontrollably. He begged her to wake up, begged her to open her eyes and look at the fetus in the film. Chapter 29:17. Muyaja's heart almost broke when he saw the tiny ball. Yin Shirshir's heart was in a mess. Back then, when she was pregnant with her first child, she was very anxious. Because she was worried about her family and her father, she was distracted and uneasy all day. Therefore, her emotions were fluctuating throughout the pregnancy. Although she was well nourished, it was precisely because of her emotions that more or less affected the development of the fetus. As a result, she was born prematurely in August. Yu almost died when he was born. Although he was pulled back from the brink of death through emergency treatment, when he grew up, his physical fitness was still quite different from that of a normal child. He was weak and sickly, and he had a sensitive personality. She owed him a lot. However, this child came too suddenly. She was caught off guard and was unprepared. Muyaja carried her back to the ward. Xiao Shui had already left. Gong Jie immediately rushed over and asked, "How's the situation?" Muyaja did not speak. He only quietly carried her to the bed, pulled the blanket over her, and sat silently by the side. Gong Jie frowned and looked at him, then at Yin Shirshir, who was on the bed, and clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, Yin Shirshir suddenly sat up on the bed. The rustling sound startled them. Muyaja and Gong Jie were shocked and turned to look at her. They saw her sitting on the bed and leaning gently against the back of the bed. Compared to her previous wooden expression, her eyes had finally regained some focus. She glanced at them indifferently. Her eyes were dull, and there was a hint of embarrassment on her face. Then she said in a deep voice, "I want to eat something." Muyaja was stunned. He did not expect her to make such a request. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was the first to react. He stood up suddenly, his eyes lit up as he walked over and asked, "What do you want to eat?" "Porridge or rice is good. Meat and vegetables should be balanced. Don't have too much oil." Because of her pregnancy reaction, she could not eat anything with too much oil. After not eating for a long time, her body seemed to have gotten used to it. Therefore, she was especially resistant to eating. She didn't seem to know that she was hungry, nor did she feel anything. She wasn't deliberately torturing herself, and she had no desire to eat at all. However, on the way back from the doctor's office, the image of the developing fetus on the ultrasound film flashed through her mind repeatedly when she was pregnant with Yu and Xiaoyichen a few years ago. She saw it on the film. It was so small, curled up into a ball. She couldn't even see its features clearly. This was her child, it was their child. Now the child in her belly should also be that small. He rarely shed tears, but when he heard the doctor say that the fetus was in bad condition, he suddenly lost his composure. He held her shoulders, his heart aching as he begged her to wake up and stop torturing herself. In the end, she was touched. She wanted to keep the child. Therefore, even though she had no appetite, she still took the initiative to ask for food. Muyaja's eyes, which were originally dark and gloomy, finally lit up. Gong Jie immediately rushed out of the ward with the cold porridge. When he reached the boiling room, there was still a queue in front of the microwave. How could he have the patience to wait? He rushed to the front and occupied the microwave without any explanation. When the porridge was heated, he brought it back to the ward and presented it to her. Chapter 29:18. Gong Jie said softly, "Sister, the porridge is ready. I didn't heat it up for too long, so it's not hot. You can eat it directly." Yin Shirshir reacted. Her hands fumbled around until she found the bowl of porridge. She held it gently. Muyaja immediately reached out to take the bowl of porridge from her hands, wanting to feed her. "I'll feed you, okay?" "I'll feed you." Yin Shirshir immediately came back to her senses and said quietly, "It's okay. I can drink it myself." Muyaja frowned. Your eyes aren't very good. Yin Shirshir smiled slightly and immediately said, I'm not as weak as you think. I just can't see clearly. I can still recognize things that are closer to me. With that said, she held the bowl with one hand and the spoon with the other. She scooped up a mouthful of porridge and brought it to her mouth. She blew on it gently before taking a bite. It wasn't hot, but it was very warm. However, she didn't have much of an appetite. In fact, she was still repulsed by food. But at the thought of the child in her stomach, she resisted the discomfort and took another big bite. Muyaja and Gongjie looked at her nervously and asked cautiously, Is there anything else you want to eat? Yin Shirshir opened her eyes blankly. Hearing this, she shook her head and said, I don't have anything in particular that I want to eat. She only ate because she wanted to protect the baby. She had listened to everything the doctor said. If she didn't eat, she was worried that it would affect the baby in her stomach. Especially when the doctor said that if she continued like this, it would definitely affect the development of the baby in her stomach. Then it might stop developing and become a stillborn. In the end, she could only have an artificial abortion. Her current bodily functions were being supplemented by sacrificing her mother's own nutrients. If this went on, it would be difficult for her child to survive. Hearing this, her heart seemed to clench fiercely in an instant. She had been in a daze earlier, and hadn't cared about the child in her stomach. But now that she heard that the child in her stomach was in danger, she immediately regained her senses. No, she couldn't let herself go anymore. At that moment, she seemed to recall Yu Yu's appearance when he was born. He was lying in the nursery box, small and wrinkled. His entire body was red and his two little hands were curled together tightly. For the first time in this world, this little guy seemed to be very nervous. He only knew how to open his little mouth and cry. Why is she crying so much? She was a little curious. As she thought about it, she gently reached out her hand. The little guy immediately reached out and held her hand tightly. His strength was not great, but his grip was very tight. Perhaps it was due to telepathy, but the little fellow's eyes were tightly shut. He was originally crying non-stop, but the moment he held her hand, he actually stopped crying. Why is it so small? Yin Shirshir looked at it carefully with tears in her eyes. It was said that when he was born, he was less than 2,500 grams. It was simply too small. At that time, tears fell from her eyes. She sighed silently in her heart. The most miraculous thing in this world was becoming a mother for the first time. She couldn't imagine how this little guy came out of her stomach. She also didn't know how these two little guys got along in her stomach for the past 8 months. Didn't they fight? Chapter 29:19. At that time, she was immediately amused by her own conjecture. As she laughed, tears fell uncontrollably from her eyes. The nurse said that it was really not easy to save the child. God knew that if she had not taken a second look at him, she would have missed the chance to save him. That one look gave the mother and son a chance to be reunited. What exactly was motherhood? It was when she saw this little guy that she wanted to give everything she had. She could not wait to present the most beautiful thing in the world to him. She was grateful for God's blessing and thus named him Yin Tianyu. God bless, God bless. God bless. Returning to her senses from her thoughts, Yin Shirshir gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She gritted her teeth and drank a mouthful of porridge. It was dull and tasteless. It was like chewing wax. She even had an inexplicable feeling of nausea. Muyaja prepared some side dishes for her. He gently said, Take your time. Don't eat so quickly. You haven't eaten for so long. If you eat too quickly, it will hurt your stomach. Okay. Yin Shirshir lowered her head as she ate the porridge. Her other hand was tightly clenched. I'm sorry, she swallowed the food in her mouth and mumbled softly. Previously, I made you guys worry. From now on, I'll eat properly. Muyaja was stunned. His lips could not help but curve into a gratified smile. Gongjie looked at her with great relief. His tightly clenched heart finally relaxed slightly. Yin Shirshir suddenly smiled and choked out. Oh, I'll be fine. Motherhood was really a magical thing. Yin Shirshir began to eat properly and sleep well. At night, she went to bed very early. In the morning, she would even leave the ward to take a walk in the hospital's back garden. Accompanied by Muyaja and Gongjie, It had been too long since she left the bed to walk properly. The doctor said that lying in bed for a long time was not a good thing for the fetus. She also needed to move around properly. Every morning, before going to work, Muyaja would accompany her for a half-hour stroll. After that, he would settle her down and watch her finish her breakfast before going to the company with peace of mind. Every afternoon, he would try his best to arrange everything. At 3 o'clock he would get off work early and come to the hospital to accompany her. Gong Jia, on the other hand, pushed aside all the matters in his hands and handed them over to others to handle. He stayed by her side to accompany her. He had always been an impatient person, but he had always been unconditionally patient with her. Yin Shishir's mental state also gradually improved. Yu Yu and Xiao Chen were also very obedient and took good care of themselves. After school, they would come to the hospital and accompany her while doing their homework. Yu Yu's homework was usually done in school. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, had to look at a pile of homework every day and suffered greatly for half a day. Every time this happened, Yu Yu and Gong Jie would accompany Yin Shishir for a walk, leaving Xiao Chen alone in the ward to break down. Gong Jie was especially excited that she was pregnant. She didn't know what was going on, but this whole family seemed to have a lot of expectations for the little guy in her belly. It'll be great if it's a girl. Gong Jie also liked girls. He imagined that if she gave birth to a little princess, he would definitely dote on this niece to the bone. Chapter 29:20. The girl would definitely be very adorable, right? When the time came, he would definitely buy her mini pink princess dresses, in order to take good care of her. Gong Jie even went out of his way to learn a lot about pregnancy. Yu Yu even mocked him for this. Imagine a person who was almost 1.9 meters tall reading books about pregnancy for a few hours every day. When Muyaja discovered him secretly reading such books, the father and son reacted the same way and even mocked him mercilessly. Gong Jie was indignant. What do you know? I'm reading these books so that I can take better care of pregnant women. Muyaja did not think much of it. However, he did not read the books for nothing. Muyaja saw that the books seemed to be useful to him. At the very least, he had learned a lot about pregnancy. Hence, he also secretly bought a few books and read them. Later on, Gong Jie found out that he was also secretly learning about pregnancy and even mocked him mercilessly. When the two men were not busy with their careers, when Yin Shishir was resting, they would each hold a book about pregnancy and read it with relish. Taking care of a pregnant woman was not an easy task. There was a period of time when her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. She was especially sleepy during the day, and would often fall asleep not long after she finished eating. She would often be startled awake by retching. She would hold onto the trash can and retch for a long time, but nothing would come out. At night, she would suffer from insomnia. Then, in the middle of the night, she would have a craving for something to eat. Sometimes it would be apples, sometimes it would be sour plums, biscuits, bread. Hence, whenever this happened, the two men Muyaja and Gong Jie, with sleepy eyes, would go to the streets to look for food for her. Pregnant women seemed to have a special liking for sour fruits. When she was pregnant with Yu Yu and Xiao Chen, the Mu family had specially assigned people to take care of them. From the beginning, everything was done properly. Hence, her pregnancy symptoms did not seem to be particularly obvious. However, when she was pregnant with her second child, her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. One night, she had a craving for cherries. Muyaja spent more than 2 hours driving and almost flipping through half of the city before he finally found a 24-hour fresh produce supermarket and bought the cherries she wanted to eat. When she came back with the cherries, Muyaja washed them for her and brought them to her. Yin Shishir was extremely touched. After calming down to nurture the fetus, the days passed by very leisurely. She didn't have to think about acting every day and night like before. After she calmed down, she could sleep soundly every day until she woke up naturally. After waking up, she would eat breakfast and take a stroll in the back garden. When she felt bored in the ward, Gong Jie would silently watch over her. Sometimes, she would turn on the TV. Even if she couldn't see clearly, she could still hear the sound from the TV. She no longer felt so lonely. Gu Xing's death was quickly suppressed by Qin Zhou through various channels. At this time, Qin Zhou's true methods were revealed. During the memorial service, Yin Shishir and Gu Xingzi's fans got into an argument. After that, nothing else happened. After that, there was no news at all. Chapter 29-21. It was actually very easy to suppress a hot topic. The reason why many news articles were so popular was because the media kept chasing them and paying attention to them. For example, Gu Xingzi's memorial service was covered all over the internet, so naturally, it was very popular. When all the media stopped paying attention to this matter, the popularity would die down very quickly. Other than Gu Xingzi's hardcore fans, the public's interest in this matter was limited. If the media did not report it, it would naturally be forgotten very quickly. Qin Zhou felt that the best way to respect Xingzi was to give him some peace and quiet. After spending a lot of money to bribe various media outlets, all the first-tier media outlets seemed to have collectively lost their memories and finally stopped paying attention to this matter. Soon the entertainment industry returned to peace and quiet. The media no longer paid attention to this matter. Although there were still many fans who were extremely persistent, it was difficult to stir up a storm. On the internet, the popularity of Gu Xingzi continued to fade. On the television, all the programs and advertisements related to him were immediately taken down. During this period, Extreme Youth was also ordered to stop promoting. Qin Zhou hoped that the public would forget about Gu Xingzi's death as soon as possible, so as to minimize the harm to others, especially Yin Shishir. Almost everyone thought that Gu Xingzi's death was related to her. Even Yin Shishir herself thought that she was the culprit behind Gu Xingzi's death. But Qin Zhou did not think so. Just like in the video, Gu Xingzi said to Yin Shishir, "I am willing to love you with my life." Although this love was indeed a little heavy, perhaps at that time he did not think so much at all. It was just his first subconscious reaction to protect her. His most selfish thought was that he hoped that she could retain a memory of him in her heart, even if it was just for a second. But he really did not know that it would bring about an unforgettable memory. He did not want to. Lethal Beauty was nearing its finale. Qin Yuyan's ending caused a lot of sighs from the audience. The role of Qin Yuyan was perfectly interpreted by Yin Shishir. Even Gu Xiaoyang couldn't imagine that a newbie could understand the role so well and perform it with such superb acting skills. In the entire series, she was probably the most tragic character, but also the most realistic one. Qin Chengel, the female lead played by Lin Ji, had a clear distinction between love and hate. Although she had all the characteristics of a female lead in a period drama, the character of Qin Yuyan portrayed the selfishness of human nature to the extreme. Becoming a demon for love, becoming a fool for love. She had changed from an innocent and harmless young girl to someone who, for the sake of love, had disregarded her own safety and schemed against everything. In the end, she had ended up in a miserable state. Before she died, she cried to the male lead played by Hua Jin, "Do you know that for you, I did everything I could to design this world for you? But in the end, I realized that the biggest mistake I made was, I fell in love with you. You hate my viciousness, but how could I not hate your heartlessness? But there was no other way. There was no other way. Who asked me to do everything just to get a glance from you? Even if it was just a glance." His hoarse cries caused countless audience members to shed tears. A pitiful and hateful character, but more realistic. The selfishness of love and hate was portrayed to the extreme by Yin Shishir. Chapter 29-22. Yin Shishir's acting skills were enthusiastically recognized by the audience. The image she created was too vivid, leaving a deep impression in people's minds. Many new fans who liked her because of Lethal Beauty dug out her humble appearance when she usually went on variety shows. Her gentle and unpretentious personality, as well as her occasionally funny side, made the fans even more fond of this actress with superb acting skills. Hua Jin had flown to Paris because he needed to take a fashion photo shoot. When he returned, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit. He rejected some of the less important jobs and stayed at the hospital to watch over her when he was free. Soon, the doctor also came up with a few plans. Mu Yaja and Yin Shishir came from the hospital to protect the fetus, so the doctor came up with two plans for her. One is to do a cornea transplant first. Recently, there was a cornea donor from Guang City. It was the cornea of a 22-year-old girl. However, if you do the surgery during pregnancy, you will have to bear a lot of risk. However, we will have stricter control of the drugs. However, we can't completely rule out any adverse effects on the fetus. However, there's a risk. Muyaja and Yin Shirshir looked at each other. The doctor looked at their expressions and knew that they could not accept this plan. Thus he said, the second plan is to give up on this donor and wait until after the delivery. After the birth, when the vitality is restored, we can look for a suitable donor. However, this cycle is very long. With the continuous deterioration of her eyesight, it might cause a lot of trouble in her life. After all, if a person who had always been healthy lost their eyesight overnight, their life would be bound and it would be difficult for them to return to the normal track. And a cornea donor was something that could only be found by chance. It was luck and opportunity to meet one. If they missed it, they might have to wait for a few more years. In these few years, there would be too many variables. Muyaja frowned and said worriedly, we were going to hold a wedding. Will this situation affect the wedding? The doctor said sincerely, my suggestion is not to rush to hold the wedding. When Yin Shirshir heard this, her expression suddenly became a little lonely. The wedding that she had been looking forward to was going to be delayed indefinitely because of this matter. She pursed her lips in grievance, looking extremely lonely. After returning from the doctor's office, she had been leaning against the bed with a gloomy expression. Their expectations for the wedding were suddenly crushed by the cruel reality, and nothing was left. Gongjie saw that she was a little unhappy the moment she came back, so he looked at Muyaja suspiciously. What happened? The wedding may have to be postponed, Muyaja said as he walked to the bed and sat down. He looked at her and asked, are you unhappy? Yin Shirshir shook her head. No. However, even though he said that he didn't, the loneliness in his eyes was so obvious that it was about to burst out. You're saying that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking. Muyaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you. Yin Shirshir was slightly stunned. Chapter 29-23. You may say that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking. Muyaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He gently rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you. Yin Shirshir was slightly stunned. Ever since she got pregnant and stayed in the hospital, her pregnancy symptoms slowly followed. Even the anxiety and emotional changes that were unique to pregnant women were reflected in her body. How terrifying was it for a normal person to be blind? In the past, she felt that things that could be done naturally had become extremely difficult. Usually when she drank water, she could pick up the teacup. But now, even lying in bed and watching TV for a while had become an extravagant hope. It was common for her to knock things over. Once, she accidentally broke a vase that Yu had given her. She once complained that the smell of disinfectant was the most common in the ward, and it gave her a headache. Hence, Yu specially ran to the florist, chose a vase, put a few fresh flowers in it, and placed it on the windowsill. Realizing that the vase had been knocked over, Yin Shirshir hurriedly reached for the corner, and her hand was covered in blood. She had knocked over the vase that Yu had given her. She was afraid that Yu would feel sorry for her. When Gongjie walked in, he saw Yin Shirshir sitting by the bed. Her hospital gown was stained with blood, and she looked a little disheveled. He rushed over and grabbed her hand. Why is there so much blood? Xiaojiang, I just wanted to go to the washroom, she said in frustration. I was groping along the wall and accidentally broke the vase. What should I do? I don't even seem to be able to do the most basic things. Gongjie laughed and said, didn't I send a nurse for you? She went to eat. Didn't you ring the bell? I wanted to try and see if I could do it myself. After all, I'm not used to having someone accompany me to the washroom. She could not even take care of herself. Lying in bed every day, she had no choice but to ask for help even if she needed to solve her physiological needs. He couldn't see. His vision was close to blindness. Everything in front of him was foggy. She was uneasy about the future. When she thought about how she wouldn't even be able to see her own flesh and blood on the day she gave birth, she felt regret and heartache. As a result, he became extremely anxious and even lost his temper for no reason. Fortunately, Muyaja and Gong Jie were unconditionally tolerant of her anxious temper. Even if she was angry, anxious, or even crying because of a trivial matter, Muyaja could still patiently comfort her until she calmed down. Gong Jie replied, "It's only temporary that you can't see. Right now, it's mainly for the little guy in your belly. The doctor said that it's too risky to perform the surgery now. We're not willing to take the risk." "I understand. There will be more opportunities in the future." "What if there's no such opportunity?" Gong Jie replied immediately, "That's impossible. There is no such assumption. Sister, don't let your imagination run wild. You're just too idle every day. With nothing to do, it's easy for your imagination to run wild. Actually, it's not as bad as you think." "I understand," Yin Shirshir immediately said. "Don't worry, I won't let my imagination run wild and make you guys worry." Chapter 29-24. There were many people in the hospital, and the ward was always dark, so it was difficult to get real peace and quiet. Hence, he discussed with the doctor and brought her back to Yinshanshi to recuperate. Yinshanshi was an excellent place with good feng shui, and was very conducive to recuperation. It was originally built as a resort. After Yinshanshi was brought back to Yinshanshi, Gong Jie was finally relieved and decided to return to Hurricane. He had a lot of work on hand that was waiting for him to rush back to deal with. He was worried that his father would become suspicious if he stayed any longer. Gong Jie did not say much goodbye, and took a private jet back to Hurricane's headquarters. Yin Shirshir began to recuperate. Of course, although she had more free time, she still found some things to do. For example, what should I name the little guy? At night, Yu and Xiaoyichen were already asleep. Muyaja was reading his email when Yin Shirshir lay on the sofa and muttered to herself, "I have a headache coming up with a name." She was a little troubled. She had been thinking for a long time about the child's name, but she still could not think of a satisfactory one. Muyaja put down his laptop and walked to her side. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead lovingly. "You haven't even confirmed whether it's a boy or a girl, yet you're already in a hurry to think of a name. Aren't you a little too anxious?" "Because it's too boring," she muttered. "I'm at home every day with nothing to do, so I'm thinking about what to name the child after it's born." "Then, you're in a hurry to come up with a name when you know the child's gender? What if you choose a boy's name and give birth to a girl? Then I'll think of a boy and a girl's name together." Muyaja laughed but went along with her and asked, "Then, do you want a girl or a boy?" Yin Shirshir laughed and said, "It's not like I can give birth to a boy just because I want a girl or a boy. This is something that can't be decided." "Then do you like a girl or a boy?" "I like both," Yin Shirshir said and asked him, "What about you?" "I hope to have a little princess." Muyaja was famous for being fond of daughters. Men had no resistance against daughters. It was said that daughters were the lovers of their fathers in their previous lives. These words were not false at all. Muyaja wholeheartedly hoped that he could have a little princess. He would definitely be overjoyed. By the way, I've always been curious about the meaning behind the name Xiaoyichen. Yin Shirshir was a little curious. It couldn't have been randomly chosen, right? The name she gave you was meaningful. She was thankful to the heavens for saving her life despite having a near-death experience when she was born. Hence, she was named Yin Tianyu. Muyaja explained, the word "yi" means light. Chen was ranked 5th in the earthly branch, and was a dragon. Put together, it means a handsome and beautiful person, rational and full of wisdom, a life of elegance, auspiciousness, success and honor. Yin Shirshir was stunned when she heard that. She smiled and teased, "Are you really majoring in finance? You seem to know a lot about these things." "I did my homework when I came up with a name." "You came up with this name?" She was a little surprised. "Yes. Grandpa wanted to come up with it himself, but I wasn't satisfied. Then, what should I name the little guy in my stomach?" Chapter 29-25. I've thought of many names, but I don't know what to choose. The art of naming a person was very profound. In this aspect, Yin Shirshir was very picky. A name was not just a simple symbol. She believed in this art. First of all, the name had to be pleasing to the ear and pleasant to the ear. A name that was unpleasant to the ear, no matter how meaningful it was, would not be liked. She also had to pay attention to the homophony. For example, Duzeting and Yuling had good meanings, but the homophony made people not know whether to laugh or cry. There couldn't be too many strokes, or it would be troublesome to write. She also had to refer to the zodiac and the 8 characters. The older generation also had to pay attention to the 5 elements of yin and yang. Which ones did you think of? He couldn't help but be curious and wanted to hear her results. If it's a boy, I thought of a few names. Yin Shirshir paused and said, Mu Tianyi, with the meaning of soaring in the sky and achieving great things. Mu Juanhao, with the meaning of a gentleman's heroic spirit. It doesn't sound good. He expressed his opinion. There's more. Yin Shirshir listed many more names. In fact, the names she came up with were not only meaningful, but also pleasant to the ear. However, Muyaja didn't like it. Have you thought of a girl's name? Yin Shirshir said matter-of-factly. Of course. Such as Mu Jinghan Mu Yi Mu Yueyao, Yueyao. Muyaja suddenly interrupted her. Yin Shirshir raised her eyebrows in surprise and pouted. What's wrong with this name? He smiled. It's very pleasant to the ear. Hey, aren't you a little too biased? Yin Shirshir said with some disdain. You obviously like girls more, so why do girls' names sound pleasant to the ear? Such an evaluation is not fair at all. Who said so? He said seriously. Yueyao is a very pleasant name. Let's call it that. Yin Shirshir said unwillingly. What if it's not a girl? Whether it's a girl or not, it's my decision, not yours. You don't have to worry. Muyaja scratched her nose and said confidently. I think that when the little guy comes out, it will definitely be a girl. What? You make it sound like you and your daughter have telepathy. Yin Shirshir was a little jealous. If it's really a girl, I won't have a place in this family in the future. You only have eyes for your daughter. In the future, when father and daughter are united, won't my life be hard? Don't you have Yu and Xiaoyi Chen? She had nothing to say. Aren't the 3 of you united? My daughter and I are of one mind, so what? So you're not allowed to do that? His reasoning was one after another. Good. You're right. You're an old sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Yin Shirshir seemed to have learned this from somewhere. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly hugged her tightly and said solemnly, Don't worry. You'll always be the most important person in my heart. No one else can compare to you. That's what you're saying now. When our daughter is born, it'll be hard to say. She felt sweet inside, but her words were unforgiving. In the future, when we have a daughter, who knows where my status will be? Muyaja said, Really? Thousands and tens of thousands of daughters can't compare to you. Thousands and tens of thousands? You'll have to be able to raise thousands and tens of thousands. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting me? Muyaja suddenly grabbed her hands and leaned closer to her. There's no one that I can't raise. It'll just depend on whether you can afford to give birth to them. Let's not talk about other things. Just based on this weight, I can't give birth. Even an old sow can't give birth to so many. Chapter 29-26. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting my ability? Muyaja suddenly grabbed her hand. Smiling deeply, he leaned closer to her and said suggestively, There's no one I can't afford to raise. Let's see if you can afford to give birth to them. I'm not a sow. I can't give birth to tens of thousands of them. Even an old sow can't give birth to that many. Yin Shirshir said angrily. It's enough for you to have 3 buffoons at home. She patted his hand and said exasperatedly, Stop fooling around, HM? Let's think of names together. I've thought of so many names, but you haven't expressed your opinion yet. Didn't I express my opinion? With that, Muyaja lowered his head and moved closer to her abdomen. He held her belly, which had yet to bulge, and smiled. Yueyao, did you hear that? This is the name that mommy gave you. Hey! Yin Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you done fooling around? How do you know that it'll definitely be a daughter? Muyaja said solemnly. Do you believe that it'll definitely be a little princess? I don't believe it. Then let's bet. Muyaja looked confident. Smiling, he said, This is probably the telepathy between father and daughter. As he spoke, he looked lovingly at her lower abdomen. It was as if he could see the little fellow inside through her belly. Yueyao, isn't this name very nice? Daddy likes it too. Yueyao, you must be good in mommy's stomach. Daddy loves you. Yin Shirshir couldn't see his face at this moment, but she could imagine that Mu Yaja's gaze was fixed on her stomach. His face must be filled with tenderness. His eyes narrowed, and his handsome brows arched gently. She remembered that he looked especially good when he smiled. His thin lips curved, outlining a gentle arc like water, with shallow smiling dimples. He rarely smiled, and it was only when he was facing her that he would reveal a rare smile. However, his smile seemed to be able to melt even the coldest ice and snow in the world in a single night. Yin Shirshir suddenly smiled contentedly. She felt that at this moment, she was surrounded by happiness. She was a little overwhelmed. Mu Yaja didn't notice the reaction on her face at all. Instead, he was focused on her stomach. After a while, he leaned forward and pressed his ear against her stomach, listening carefully. After a while, he started talking to himself in front of her stomach, as if he was communicating with the little fellow in her stomach. Yin Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She held back her laughter, and didn't want to disturb him. Mu Yaja suddenly raised his head and asked quizzically, "Can she hear what I said?" "Are you stupid?" Yin Shirshir couldn't help but say. "It's useless to listen to it now. At this time, there's no fetal movement." "Oh, is that so?" He furrowed his brows, looking disappointed. "I thought she could hear me in her stomach." "She can't hear you. The child can't even understand what people are saying, let alone a fetus that hasn't developed yet." Mu Yaja caressed her lower abdomen lovingly with a contented smile on his lips. His gaze never left her lower abdomen, as if there was a rare treasure hidden there. Wasn't it a rare treasure? He had even named it. He said gently, "Yueyao, you must be good and don't be naughty. Develop well and grow well. Daddy will wait for you." Chapter 29-27. Pfft. Yin Shirshir covered her mouth and snickered. "I already said that she can't hear you now. What are you talking to yourself for? What if she can hear me?" He raised his eyebrows disapprovingly and reiterated, "There's telepathy between father and daughter." "Okay, telepathy." She went along with him. Mu Yaja gently caressed her belly as he fantasized. If the daughter looks like you, what will she look like? Forgive his limited imagination. The face he imagined was either a miniature version of Yin Shirshir or a combination of Yu Yu and Xiaoyi Chen's faces. It was very out of place. When Yin Shirshir heard this, she said, "I heard that daughters look more like their fathers." "Huh, there's such a saying?" "Of course. Haven't you heard of it?" Yin Shirshir said seriously. "It's said that sons look like their mothers, while daughters look like their fathers. Look, you look so much like me." It's also said that sons are closer to their mothers. Daughters, on the other hand, are closer to their fathers. Mu Yaja grabbed her face and scrutinized it before nodding. Yu and Ichin do look more like you. Their facial features are delicate, especially their eyes. After a pause, he said confidently, "Then my daughter will definitely be a beautiful girl when she grows up." Yin Shirshir laughed. "Narcissist. Why are you so narcissistic?" "This is the truth," he said solemnly. "Daughters look like you? I can't imagine that." Yin Shirshir's mind went dark, and she could not think of any image. Mu Yaja also fell into a fantasy. His imagination was also a little lacking. In his mind, a baby girl's face covered his features. No matter how he looked at it, it felt out of place. Suddenly, he was shocked by the face that he imagined. She should be very pretty. He felt a little guilty. He did not know what his daughter would look like if she inherited his looks. Yin Shirshir thought about it carefully and said casually, "If it's a daughter, her eyes and nose will be like yours. She will be very beautiful." Actually. Yin Shirshir pondered for a moment, and suddenly smiled with motherly gentleness. "I also hope that the little guy in my stomach is a girl." "Ha, you want a daughter too?" "Of course," Yin Shirshir said matter-of-factly. "They say that daughters are sweet. Yu and little Chen will definitely feel aggrieved if they hear this." Mu Yaja's heart ached for the two little guys for a few seconds. "If she's really my daughter, I'll definitely prepare a super big walk-in closet for her. Since she was young, I bought many beautiful princess dresses for her. pink, white, black, and dressed her up like a little princess. However, Muyaja did not agree. What do you mean by dressing up? I, Muyaja's daughter, will be born a princess. Yin Shirshir's lips twitched. Yes, yes, she will be born a princess. Your Majesty. It's the 10th week now. Muyaja ignored her and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her forehead gently and said expectantly, In 2 weeks, it will be 3 months. In 8 months, she will come into this world. I must prepare well to welcome her. How? Yin Shirshir asked curiously. He said seriously, It's time to prepare the nursery. Chapter 29-28. A nursery? Yin Shirshir slapped her forehead hard. Oh no, I forgot. I haven't had time to prepare a nursery. This little guy came too suddenly, so I wasn't mentally prepared at all. She felt a little regretful. She couldn't see anything clearly now, so it was hard for her to give any suggestions. She also couldn't personally design a princess room. However, Muyaja said, It's okay, I'll prepare it. Naturally, Muyaja was more than happy to do this. Even though preparing a nursery was an extremely tedious process, it was an extremely happy thing for him. Of course, this wasn't just for show. The next day he held her hand and brought Yu and Xiao Yichen to the counter. Yin Shirshir was wearing sunglasses, so it was a little difficult for her to walk. Yu and Xiao Yichen suggested that they hire a nanny to support her. However, Muyaja was worried about the servants. If they were careless and accidentally bumped into something, he would be the one who would be heartbroken. After they got out of the nanny van, Muyaja supported her. Yin Shirshir held his hand and carefully took a step forward. However, she seemed a little timid. She couldn't see anything, so every step she took was extremely careful. Just hold my hand. Muyaja held her hand tightly and said, Follow me, don't be afraid. Yin Shirshir also held his hand tightly. In a situation where she couldn't see anything clearly and the whole world was dark, even if someone was holding her hand, she would still be subconsciously worried about what the road would be in front of her with every step she took. It was as if she was walking on the edge of a cliff, and she was on tenterhooks. It was difficult for ordinary people to understand this kind of uneasiness. However, ordinary people would still be worried even if they were held by someone with their eyes closed. Moreover, the person holding her wouldn't be able to notice even the smallest detail at all times. However, he said, Follow me, don't be afraid. He wouldn't let her fall, bump, or touch anything. Yin Shirshir trusted him wholeheartedly, so she held his hand and followed his footsteps. Muyaja held her hand and led her to the baby and baby counter. Baby Q was the world's leading baby and baby counter. Yin Shirshir was their wedding home. But the nursery was only slightly renovated. It was empty, and even the wallpaper wasn't properly pasted. They started with the wallpaper selection. Yu and Xiao Yichen also started browsing. The shop assistant brought over a thick stack of books. Muyaja flipped them page by page. They were all European designs, and there wasn't anything that caught his eye. Girls should be pink, right? Yin Shirshir said. When I was young, I especially liked pink. If she's a daughter, she should take after me in this aspect. In every girl's heart, there was a princess dream. She imagined herself to be a princess in a fairy tale, waking up in a fairy tale style room every day. Opening her eyes, she would see a pink world and a big bed covered with pink bed curtains. She would enjoy the dreamlike world to her heart's content. Muyaja snapped his fingers and said, Yes, pink. Girls all like pink. He didn't realize it at first. The shop assistant understood what he was hinting at, and immediately brought over a stack of books. They were all pink wallpaper designs. Muyaja started flipping through them seriously. He was picky, and just the wallpaper alone took him a lot of effort. Chapter 29-29. After choosing the wallpaper, the family started to choose the crib, toy box, wardrobe, and decorations. Can I trust your taste? Yin Shirshir was a little doubtful. She didn't know what the princess room would look like. Could it be it would be ugly? A man's taste was always hard to explain. She was going to cry if it turned out to be a mix and match trend. However, Muyaja was very confident in his taste. Yu approved of the effect of his decorations. Of course, Xiao Yichen's opinion was put aside. He didn't seem to know much about aesthetics. When asked, he said innocently, "As long as little sister likes it." Yu couldn't help but complain. "Little sister isn't born yet. How do you know if she likes it or not?" When Yun Shirshir heard this, she couldn't help but complain. "We haven't even confirmed whether it's a boy or a girl. How do you know it's going to be a little sister?" "Oh, you're right." Yu suddenly clenched her fists and said, "What if she gives birth to a little brother?" When Muyaja and Xiao Yichen heard this, they were stunned for a few seconds. Yu said meekly, "I hope it's a little sister too, but what if it's not? Maybe things won't go according to our wishes." Muyaja and Xiao Yichen's expressions darkened. They seemed to have thought of this possibility as well, and there was a hint of melancholy in their eyes. When the time comes and it's a boy, living in a pink crib seems a little uncomfortable. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but add, "Impossible. Your genes are so strong. If you gave birth to 2 boys in a row, the chances of the third being a boy are very high." Yun Shirshir continued. Muyaja snorted coldly and said, "Impossible. It must be a girl. Anyway, we'll just decorate it according to the princess room." Yu suddenly pulled Xiao Yichen aside and whispered, "Mu-Yichen, Daddy is so biased. If Mommy really gives birth to a little princess, won't we lose our place in Daddy's heart?" "I don't know about you, but as for me..." Xiao Yichen teared up. "I don't seem to have any status." Yu pursed her lips. "Really?" Mu-Yichen felt so wrong that he was about to cry. "Daddy didn't put in so much effort to decorate my room when I was young. I've never had much of a presence in his heart. Daddy favors girls over boys?" Yu came to a conclusion. "Ugh," Xiao Yichen stroked his chin. "However, I still hope that Mommy will give birth to a little princess. I've wanted a little sister for a long time." Yu added, "Me too. A little sister is so cute. She's so soft and adorable. I can even imagine her smiling at me. Her eyes will curve into crescents as if there are countless little stars in them. She's so beautiful." Little Yichen's heart was bursting with anticipation. The image of a cute little girl smiling innocently at him appeared in Yu's mind, and his heart almost melted at the thought. Thus, the 2 little guys reached a consensus. That was, it didn't matter if she fell out of favor in front of her daddy. It didn't matter if she lost her status. The most important thing was that they liked a little sister. Regardless of whether they lost Daddy's favor or not, having a little sister was more important. Is liking a daughter a hereditary trait? Yu thought about it seriously. If it were me, I would also like a daughter more. Chapter 29:30. Yu giggled, amused by him. Under the combined efforts of the father and son, the princess room was quickly decorated. The walnut flooring was redone, pink wall coverings, white solid wood crib, dreamy bed curtains and a beautiful crystal chandelier. Everything was as luxurious as a castle. After the princess room was decorated, Muyaja held Yun Shirshir's hand and showed her around. Even though she couldn't see anything, Muyaja was extremely excited as he explained everything to her step by step. Yun Shirshir touched the wall with her hand and felt that the wall coverings had a very good texture. She couldn't help but ask, "What color is the wall coverings?" "It's pink, but it's not just the wall coverings. There's a piece of wallpaper with a picture of a pink unicorn." The pink unicorn was Laji Group's mascot. After Yu took over, he designed a new generation of mascots. Later on, it was printed as a label and printed on every toy package. Later on, this rainbow unicorn had its own name and became the symbol of Laji Group. The children loved this unique and cute little unicorn, and later on, it gave birth to countless products. Yu saw this picture on the wallpaper by chance and felt that it was very meaningful. Hence, he discussed with Muyaja and put up this side of the wallpaper. Yun Shirshir had to use her imagination to imagine the baby room that he had decorated. It seemed to be a little difficult, but seeing how excited the father and son were, she trusted their judgment for the time being. She originally thought that after decorating the princess room, Muyaja would stop. However, little did she know that she had yet to experience the crazy side of a certain man. One night, when Muyaja came back, he walked into the room and went to her bedside. She was resting when she heard him say mysteriously, "Shirshir, guess what I brought back today?" "What?" She was curious. She didn't know what he had brought back with him. He smiled and said casually, I bought many dresses for my daughter. Yin Shirshir was stunned and at a loss. Ah. Skirt. Muyaja immediately ordered. Outside the door, the servants came in with stacks of dresses and placed them in front of her. Yin Shirshir couldn't see anything. She only felt that the clothes in front of her were piled up into a mountain. Ever since the naming incident, a certain man seemed to be especially enthusiastic about the little guy in her stomach. Wasn't it a little too extravagant to buy dozens of dresses all at once? The child hasn't been born yet. Isn't it a little too early to buy clothes now? She said hesitantly. Why is it so early? Muyaja said disapprovingly. The earlier you buy it, the earlier you prepare it. But children develop very quickly. If you buy so many pieces, the child might not be able to wear them in time. No. Do you think I haven't considered that? He scratched the bridge of her nose lightly and said slowly. The dresses I bought are all different sizes. From the clothes she wears when she's born to the clothes she wears when she's 5 or 6 years old, I picked a few styles. 5 or 6 years old. Yin Shirshir was speechless. She'll have to wait 5 or 6 years before she can wear them. By then the styles I picked now will be a little outdated. That won't happen. Chapter 29:31. My daughter will definitely be beautiful. Outdated clothes will definitely look good on her. A certain man seemed especially confident. His extremely confident words were completely different from his usual style of speaking. In the future, would this man evolve into a slave to his daughter? Yin Shirshir couldn't help but imagine it in her mind. In the image, Muyaja lovingly carried the tender little girl in his arms, coaxing her to eat, hugging her to sleep, and even when walking, he couldn't bear to put her down on the ground and let his daughter ride on his shoulders. She then imagined Muyaja carrying a chubby son with a bitter and vengeful look. Yin Shirshir's heart was beating like a drum. The little guy hadn't even been born yet, and he was already excitedly preparing this and that. If the baby was a boy, then not only would the princess's room be decorated for nothing, what would he do with the piles and piles of dresses that he had bought? It would be fine if the baby was a daughter, but if it turned out to be a son in the end, his heart would definitely be severely disappointed. He would definitely be very disappointed. Yin Shirshir suddenly asked curiously, Let me ask you seriously. If the baby isn't a daughter and it's a son, will you still like it? Muyaja pondered for a moment and then said solemnly, Of course. As long as it's our child, I'll like it. I see that you like daughters so much. When the time comes, you won't be begging me to give birth to another one, right? When Muyaja heard this, he hugged her and rubbed his face against hers intimately. What nonsense are you thinking about again? You're not a sow. If you don't want to give birth, I won't force you. A certain man seemed to have forgotten how this child came about. If he hadn't replaced her contraceptive pills with folic acid, Yin Shirshir wouldn't have fallen for it so coincidentally. Yin Shirshir was completely kept in the dark. She thought that the child had broken through all the obstacles to get here. Little did she know that Muyaja had also tampered with it. Oh, by the way, we have to go for a prenatal checkup soon. Yin Shirshir gently touched her belly and complained. Recently, I seem to like sleeping a lot. My vomiting has slowly subsided, but I get hungry easily in the middle of the night. I want to eat something, but I don't know if I can eat it. Of course you can. Muyaja said. I've asked the doctor. He said that I can have some snacks. There are some biscuits and bread at home. When you are hungry, you can eat some biscuits. Yin Shirshir couldn't help but silently criticize her. If she ate and slept every day, would she lose control of her body shape after giving birth? She heard that many pregnant women lost their figures after giving birth. When she gave birth to Yu and Mu Yichen, she was only 18 years old. She was still young, so she maintained her figure very well. But now she was in her 20s. No matter what, she was still a little worried about this. Muyaja glanced at her and couldn't help but make up a story. Why? Are you afraid that you'll gain weight if you eat too much? When Yin Shirshir heard this, she bit her lip in embarrassment. What if I lose my figure? It'll be a nightmare to gain 15 kilograms all of a sudden. It's okay. You're so thin now. Take advantage of your pregnancy and gain some weight. He felt that she was too thin. Chapter 29:32. Especially a while ago, when she didn't eat or drink, her nutrition couldn't keep up, and she lost a lot of weight. His heart ached terribly. In the end, she was still worried about whether she would gain weight. If I really eat until I become a big fat person, won't you despise me? The man said matter-of-factly. I can't do anything about it. We're already an old married couple. Would I still care about whether you're fat or not? Oh. Yin Shirshir was quite taken aback. All right, I'm just teasing you. If you gain weight, I won't despise you. You're lying. Mu Yaja suddenly thought of something and said to her, soon, we'll have to prepare for a prenatal checkup. Okay. At the mention of prenatal checkup, Yin Shirshir asked curiously, I heard that the gender of the fetus can be determined at 16 weeks. Okay. But isn't the law against it? To me this law doesn't apply. Why do you ask? Yin Shirshir said. Why don't we do a gender test? However, Mu Yaja said, it's better to have fewer ultrasounds. There's no need to rush the test. When Yin Shirshir was 4 months pregnant, Mu Yaja took her for a prenatal checkup. After the checkup, all the indicators were very good. Over the past month, under Mu Yaja's meticulous care, her body had recovered a lot. The doctor who did the prenatal checkup for her was a female doctor. In the office, she looked at the various data reports while sizing up the man beside Yin Shirshir. She couldn't help but say enviously, Mrs. Mu, you're so lucky. Every time you do a prenatal checkup, President Mu follows you around and does it himself. You're so lucky to have such a considerate and gentle husband who dotes on you so much. Yin Shirshir smiled and held his hand tightly. She pursed her lips and said, he's even more nervous than I am when I'm pregnant. I wasn't feeling well recently, so he was afraid that something would happen to me. Mu Yaja stroked her hair lovingly and asked slowly, is the fetus healthy? Chairman Mu, don't worry. The fetus is very healthy. As the doctor spoke, he suddenly smiled mysteriously and asked, I heard from young Madam Mu that Chairman Mu has already started preparing the nursery. Yes. It's ready. Princess room? The doctor smiled. Yin Shirshir also smiled and said, it's not just a princess room. We even bought a bunch of clothes and hung them in the wardrobe, waiting for the baby to wear them when he's born. However, all the clothes he had prepared were for girls. I laughed at him and said, what if we have a boy? What should we do? Are you going to let your son wear all these dresses? The doctor was stunned for a moment and did not know whether to laugh or cry. So Chairman Mu likes daughters? Yes. He was looking forward to the baby in my stomach being a girl. He likes girls. He likes them so much. Young madam, what about you? Do you like daughters too? Of course. I like my daughter very much, but not as much as him. However, the doctor said, generally speaking, a father would prefer a daughter more. She's the apple of my eye. We still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Chapter 29:33. Pausing for a moment, the doctor continued, but now it seems like this is probably telepathy. It's fate. Yin Shirshir smiled. Then she seemed to have realized something. She raised her eyebrows and asked suspiciously, what did you say? Mu Yaja, who was behind her, also looked stunned. What do you mean? The doctor smiled and said, Chairman Mu, Madam Mu, congratulations. You have a little princess in your tummy. Chairman Mu, you have a daughter. Mu Yaja was in a daze for a long while before he finally regained his senses. He couldn't care less about being reserved. He looked at Yin Shirshir in surprise and asked again, it's really a girl? Yes. The ultrasound confirmed that it's a girl. The accuracy of the ultrasound is very high. Generally speaking, it can be 100% confirmed. Chairman Mu, congratulations. The princess room was prepared correctly. Mu Yaja's nervous expression finally relaxed. His eyebrows were raised high in excitement. He was so happy that he didn't know what to do. He squatted down and looked at Yin Shirshir. Holding her shoulders, he was so happy that he almost lost control of his emotions. Shirshir, we have a daughter. Yes, yes. Yin Shirshir was happy for him too. Even though she could not see the expression on his face, she could imagine how happy he was just by hearing the slight tremble in his voice, due to the sudden happiness he was feeling right now. Mu Yaja was so happy that he couldn't control himself. He hugged her and lifted her into his arms. Ignoring the fact that there were outsiders around, he carried her and spun her around a few times. Ah! Yin Shirshir was so shocked that she hugged his shoulders nervously. She said reproachfully, "You scared me." "Shirshir, I'm so happy. I can't believe that this is real." Muyaja hugged the back of her head. His thin lips couldn't help but curve into a gentle smile. He thought about how soon the child would be born, and he would be able to carry a little princess. His mood was like a hydrogen balloon that wanted to fly into the sky. "Put me down." She was bashful and embarrassed as she lightly punched his shoulder. "It's so ugly. At least be a little more reserved." The doctor laughed and said, "I've been in the obstetrics and gynecology department for so many years, and I've seen many such scenes. Many new stay-at-home fathers can't help themselves. Young madam, you don't have to feel embarrassed." Muyaja put her down and couldn't help but hug her, kissing her again and again. Shirshir, you've worked hard." All right. I know you're happy." She paused for a moment and said playfully, "Congratulations, Mr. Mu. You're going to be a father again, and this time it's a daughter. He has both a son and a daughter, which is enough to be called good." As she spoke, she reached out her hand and gently caressed his face. Her fingertips accidentally touched his eyelids and touched a trace of wetness. She couldn't help but be startled, and her heart twitched. Thank you for pulling yourself together for me and our child." His throat actually felt like it was choked up. Yin Shirshir widened her eyes in a daze. However, she heard him say in a low voice, "Did you know? I almost thought that I was going to lose you." As Muyaja spoke, he held her hand and gently kissed her fingertips. Because of this great happiness and excitement, his eyes couldn't help but redden. There was the joy of regaining what he had lost. The happiness of surviving a disaster. Hearing his extremely tense voice, Yin Shirshir's eyes also welled up with tears. Chapter 29:34. During the period when Gu Xingze left her, she was immersed in immense guilt and pain, so much so that she neglected his feelings for a while. At that time, she was in a muddle-headed state. She guarded the pain in her heart day and night, constantly licking her wound. Little did she know that he was also carefully protecting her. Every time she woke up from a nightmare, he was always by her bedside, busy comforting her, wiping away her cold sweat, and coaxing her to sleep. When she was at her lowest point, he was holding the bowl, coaxing her over and over again, lying to her and coaxing her to eat. She could not see how nervous he was. But sometimes, when she was half awake, she could feel that he was by her bedside, gently holding her hand, unwilling to let go. She did not know about his suffering, much less his pain. He was not good with words, much less expressing himself. Her man was an extremely introverted man. His emotions were hidden deep in his heart. During that period of time, he was also suffering. He did not know how to share her pain, nor did he know how to bring her out of that shadow. He was a man who got jealous easily. In the past, she could not even mention Gu Xingze's name. But at that time, she was watching Gu Xingze's videotape and sat there in a daze for the whole afternoon. He watched from the side, feeling helpless and heartbroken. He whispered in her ear countless times, Shirshir, you still have me. Gu Xingze is no longer around, but you still have me. I can't lose you. Wake up, okay? Can you let yourself go, please? Let yourself go. Don't torture yourself anymore. If you get better, I'll accept any price." He held her shoulders more than once and said word by word, Shirshir, Gu Xingze is not the only one who is willing to protect you with his life. There's me too. I can do it too. Don't I love you with my life too? But every time he saw her indifference, he could do nothing but hold her in his arms with heartache. She often woke up from nightmares, and when she woke up, she would sit there motionless, tears constantly falling. He hurriedly wiped her tears and endured the bitterness in his heart. God knows, when he saw her tears, his heart was about to be torn apart. Her heart had died, leaving behind his heart, which was constantly trembling in fear. For the first time in his life, he felt a bone-deep fear and dread. He was afraid that she wouldn't be able to make it. He was afraid that she would leave him and the child in her stomach. He was afraid he had lost her. Later, her maternal instincts were awakened, and she began to try to eat, to try to talk, to try to get back on track. He was pleasantly surprised. But he was still very careful. He didn't want to touch her or hurt her at all. He didn't dare to be too happy. He was afraid that God would be jealous of him and take revenge on him. Once his dream was shattered, he would lose everything. He carefully guarded her and protected her. He was worried about her being in the hospital, so he brought her back to Yunshanshi to nurse her pregnancy. The time she spent nurturing her fetus was the happiest time of her life. Chapter 29:35. Yunshanshi suddenly recalled that there were times when she wanted to eat cherries in the middle of the night. He and Gong Jia had searched through half of the capital before he found them and bought them back. However, she had lost her appetite and didn't eat a single one. He coaxed her to eat one or two before coaxing her back to sleep. As her husband, it could be said that she was able to recover so quickly because of his hard work. However, after the prenatal checkup and finding out that the fetus was stable and healthy, and that her body was gradually getting back on track, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. For a moment, happiness filled his heart, and he was at a loss for what to do. So much so that he actually cried tears of joy. Even though he held it in, the rims of his eyes reddened, and the dampness on his eyelids touched her deeply. Muyaja hugged her, his lips trembling slightly as he gently caressed her face over and over again. Yunshanshi held back her tears and said reproachfully, "Are you really that happy knowing that it's a daughter?" She sniffled and said half-jokingly, "Looks like I really don't have any status in the future. Our daughter has become your heart, your liver, your spleen, lungs, and kidneys. What about me? Don't tell me I've become your duodenum, your appendix?" Muyaja smirked and said, "How can that be? Seeing how excited you are, I feel that I definitely won't have any status in the future. Our daughter is my heart and you are my lungs. Both of them are equally important." "The lungs don't seem to be as important as the heart." Yunshanshi deliberately fussed with him. "Look, our daughter is like a heart. Without our daughter, will your heart not be able to beat?" Upon hearing this, Muyaja laughed. Thinking that she was jealous, he couldn't help but laugh. "You're even jealous of your own daughter? Can't I be? Do you have a problem with that?" Sure. Muyaja held her face lovingly and looked at her delicate face lovingly. He smiled gently and said, "But without you, I can't even breathe." Yunshanshi was stunned. She was deeply moved by his incomparably sincere words. "Without you, I can't even breathe." She hugged him tightly as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes again. She couldn't stop sobbing. "Thank you for waiting for me for so long." She pursed her lips and hot tears fell on his shoulder. She smiled and said, "I won't be so willful in the future. I won't scare you anymore." "Yes." Muyaja smiled. She didn't know how much tenderness was hidden in his gaze when he looked at her. When Yu and Xiaoyichen returned home from school, they could smell a sweet scent the moment they opened the door. When Xiaoyichen smelled it, he almost drooled. He sniffed greedily for a long time, and his eyes lit up. "Wow, it smells so good." Yu smelled it and said, "This is the aroma of cake. Is it some important festival? Or is it someone's birthday?" He thought about it and realized that no one in the family was celebrating their birthday. The two little guys squeezed into the dining room one after the other. They saw Yunshanshi sitting at the dining table with her hands supporting her cheeks. There were several delicious dishes in front of her, and in the middle was a 12-inch cake. It was sweet and tempting. Wow. Xiaoyichen wiped his saliva. He was already famished when he returned home from school. When he saw this sumptuous scene, he was undoubtedly salivating. "You're back." Chapter 29:36. Yu and Xiaoyichen looked at each other and asked curiously, "Mommy, what's the occasion today? Why did you make a cake?" "Do you want to know?" Yunshanshi smiled mysteriously but deliberately didn't say anything. Muyaja walked out of the kitchen with a jug of fruit juice and an apron around his waist. He looked like a house husband. Yunshanshi said that she wanted to drink freshly squeezed fruit juice, so he went into the kitchen and studied it for a while. Finally, he figured out how to make a jug of fruit juice. Yu's face turned slightly pale when she saw this. She looked at the table full of dishes and then at the apron he was wearing. The corners of her lips twitched. "Daddy, did you make this table full of dishes?" Muyaja placed the jug of fruit juice on the table and glanced at them. Before he could say anything, A voice came from behind him. Of course not. An angry voice came from the kitchen. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen looked over and saw Hua Jin walking out of the kitchen with an apron around his waist and beads of sweat on his face. He said angrily, "How could your daddy possibly know how to cook? I made all of these. I ordered the cake from a cake shop." "You know how to cook?" Yu Yu was even more surprised. "Of course." Hua Jin patted his chest and said, "I've been cooking since I was young." Yu Yu didn't say anything on the surface, but she was secretly criticizing him in her heart. Would he get food poisoning after eating all of these dishes? Xiao Yichen was also skeptical and didn't believe in Hua Jin's culinary skills. Yu Yu said, "Mommy hasn't answered me yet. What kind of occasion is it today?" She even invited brother Hua Jin over. Hua Jin felt even more wronged when he heard this. "Why? Can't I be a guest if it's not an important occasion?" Yu Yu chuckled and stuck out her tongue. Hua Jin continued, "Also, you should change the way you address me. Call me uncle." "Uncle." "All right. Yu Yu, Xiao Yichen, it's time to eat. Go wash your hands quickly. I'll tell you the good news after you're done washing your hands." When Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen heard that it was good news, they didn't hesitate and immediately ran into the bathroom. When they returned to the dining room after washing their hands, Hua and Mu Yaja were already seated at the table. By the time they were done washing their hands, they returned to the dining room table. The two little lads sat down and asked eagerly, "Mommy, it's time for you to answer us, isn't it? What's the good news?" Mu Yaja and Yin Shirshir looked at each other. The former was smug while the latter was a little shy. Under Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen's curious gazes, the man leaned forward and said mysteriously, "You're going to be older brothers." Yu Yu didn't think much of it when she heard this. "Is this the good news?" "We knew it a long time ago." Yin Shirshir said angrily, "Stop teasing them." Mu Yaja put his arm around her shoulders and smiled. Then he said to Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, "Congratulations, you're going to have a younger sister. Don't you think this is something worth celebrating?" Younger sister. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were stunned for a moment. Xiao Yichen was the first to react. He straightened his neck in excitement and said in surprise, "Really? Daddy, how did you know?" Yu Yu looked at Mu Yaja strangely from the corner of her eyes. She was a little doubtful. That's right. Daddy, how did you know? Don't tease us. You're making us happy for nothing." Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and deliberately kept them in suspense. Chapter 2937. Yin Shirshir smiled and continued. "Today, Mommy went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. The doctor told us after we did an ultrasound. He said that I'm carrying a little princess in my stomach. Aren't you going to be older brothers?" When Xiao Yichen heard this, he was so excited that his eyebrows danced. "Wow. Really? Oh my God. It's really a little sister. Is my dream finally going to come true?" "Don't get so excited." Yu Yu patted his shoulder and pretended to be calm. "Are the ultrasound results accurate?" "I heard that some ultrasound results may not be accurate." "Of course it's accurate. Silly." Mu Yaja glared at him and asked, "Are you saying that you prefer a little brother to a little sister?" "No," Yu Yu instinctively insisted. "I prefer a little sister." But the surprise came too suddenly. Yu Yu looked at Yin Shirshir's face, which was brimming with happiness. Then he looked at Mu Yaja and Hua Jin's faces, which were also filled with surprise. He finally believed it. However, compared to Xiao Yichen, the way he expressed his surprise was very restrained, just like Mu Yaja. He pretended to be calm as he held his drink, and tried to take a sip of juice to calm himself down. However, after drinking half the glass, he still couldn't suppress the ecstasy in his heart. He placed the glass on the table and looked extremely touched. The whole world suddenly bloomed with flowers and fireworks. He was in an extremely good mood. "I have a little sister." Yu Yu clutched his chest. There his heart was beating rapidly. He was touched. So touched. This was great news. Xiao Yichen also said excitedly, "How long do I have to wait before I can hold my cute little sister?" "Why are you even more anxious than your daddy?" Hua Jin smiled and looked at him. "Wait a little longer. It'll take at least 6 months." Yu Yu was much more attentive than Xiao Yichen. He suddenly asked anxiously. Mommy, since you've done the prenatal checkup, how's the baby? Yin Shirshir couldn't hide her excitement and said, It's very stable. Your sister is developing very well in my stomach. Very healthy. The doctor said that she will definitely be a smart little princess. The huge rock hanging in Yu Yu's heart finally fell to the ground. He smiled with relief. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as it's healthy and safe. He had always been sensible. Even though he yearned for his mommy to give birth to a younger sister, as an older brother, he would definitely dote on this younger sister. But some time ago, mommy's health was terrible. He either went on a hunger strike or went blind. During that period of time, he felt as if the sky was about to collapse. Later on, he brought her home to nurse her back to health. Daddy pushed away a lot of work and took good care of her. The whole family was on tenterhooks, afraid that something would happen to the child in her stomach and bring another blow to mommy. However, now that the prenatal checkup was done and the baby was doing well, he was completely relieved. Today is really a good day to celebrate. Hua Jin poured fruit juice for everyone and took the lead to raise his goblet. He said encouragingly, Shouldn't we toast to celebrate? Okay. Muyaja nodded. Yin Shirshir smiled and reached out to touch the goblet. When Muyaja saw this, he thoughtfully pushed the goblet to her. She held it firmly and raised it carefully. She smiled sweetly and said, Cheers. Cheers. Everyone raised their goblets in unison and clinked them gently with hers, making a pleasant clinking sound. Cheers. Everyone cheered in unison. Muyaja was especially happy. He drank the fruit juice in one gulp. Yu Yu also drank the fruit juice in his goblet. When no one was paying attention to him, he gently reached out and quickly wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. Beside him, Xiao Chen's sharp eyes noticed this and couldn't help but hug his shoulders emotionally. He smiled and said, Yu Yu, we're going to be older brothers. Chapter 29:38. Yin Shirshir felt extremely blessed, especially when she heard the sounds of the two little guys dancing around her and blowing out the candles. Hua Jin was making a racket at the side, bickering with little Chen as they divided the cake. Yu Yu, on the other hand, was pestering her, asking if she had thought of a name for his sister. A name? Yin Shirshir narrowed her eyes and smiled. She asked tentatively, I thought of many names and discussed it with your daddy. Your daddy said that Yueyao is a nice name. It's poetic. Yu Yu's face twitched. He said in disdain, Yueyao? That's not a nice name. Daddy has no taste at all. When Muyaja heard this, he smacked the back of his head unhappily. Ouch, it hurts. Yu Yu held the back of his head and pouted unwillingly. I didn't say anything wrong. Daddy, why did you hit me? What's wrong with Yueyao? What's wrong with it? Yu Yu argued. Don't you think that the name is too old-fashioned? Yin Shirshir couldn't sit still anymore. When she heard Yu Yu's complaints, she felt wronged. She wanted to cry but had no tears. She reminded Yu Yu carefully. Yu Yu, Mommy was the one who came up with this name. Your daddy just picked this one. When Yu Yu heard this, he looked embarrassed. He immediately cleared his throat and said awkwardly, Actually, this name is quite nice. Yueyao Mu, the Jade Pool Fairy under the moon. Is that how it feels? Yes, yes. This explanation of the name simply hit the nail on the head. Yin Shirshir said contentedly, That's what I meant. Yueyao Yueyao. What a beautiful name. Yueyao Mu Yueyao. This name is not bad. Yu Yu flattered. Mommy is indeed a top student. She can actually come up with such a nice name. Muyaja, who was standing at the side, was a little dissatisfied. His face was extremely dark. He reached out and pinched Yu Yu's ear, pulling him to his side. Yin Tianyu, is this your stance? Just now in front of me. You kept saying that this name didn't sound good and complained about it over and over again. Why is it that when Mommy said that she came up with this name, you kept praising it? Yu Yu shamelessly. Because it's really nice. If her surname was Yun, it would definitely sound even better. Surname Yin? Hearing this, Hua Jin raised an eyebrow, touched his chin and suddenly laughed. Indeed, Yu Yu has a point. Yin Yueyao is indeed much nicer than Mu Yueyao. Muyaja. Mui Chen also chimed in. Yin Yueyao is nicer. Yin Yueyao is nicer. Alright, Let little sister take mommy's surname. Hearing this, Yu chuckled and said half-jokingly, Daddy will be heartbroken and can't bear to. If little sister's surname is Mu, Daddy may not be willing. No. Muyaja, however, said, Yin is fine too. He lowered his gaze and looked lovingly at Yin Shirshir's slightly bulging belly. He smiled and said, whether her surname is Yin or Mu, she's still my daughter. Wow. Yu was excited when he heard this. Daddy, are you really willing? If little sister and mommy have the same surname, then little sister and I will have the same surname. Chapter 2939. On the surface he was all smiles, but deep down, Yu was well aware of this fact. Muyaja really did not have much of a fixation on the issue of surnames. Back then, when he officially announced Yu's identity to the public, he did not say that he would change Yu's surname. That was because Yu said that Yun Tianyu was a name given to him by his mother, and he could not change a single word of it. His surname was Yun, and it would be Yun for the rest of his life. He would never change it back to Mu. Muyaja knew how stubborn he was, so he naturally would not insist on it. However, Yu did not expect his father to not have much of a fixation on his sister's surname, either. So it's decided then? Yin Shirshir smiled and sought his opinion. Yin Yueyao? I think it sounds good too. Alright. What's important is that you think it sounds good. Yu and Xiaoyichen were caught off guard and were fed a mouthful of food. Daddy, Mommy, is it really okay to torture us like this? They are still children. Can't you let them off? Let's eat the cake. Yu mercilessly interrupted the loving scene between the two and started to eat the cake. Hua Jin had already cut and distributed the cake. Yu placed the biggest piece in front of Yin Shirshir and smilingly said, Mommy, quickly eat. Yin Shirshir reached out to feel for the cutlery. Yu considerately passed the cutlery to her and said reproachfully, Mommy, it's not convenient for you to eat. If you need anything, just tell me, and I'll get it for you. I can't always rely on you. Yin Shirshir continued. Don't tell me that I can't see for the rest of my life and have to rely on you to serve me. It's only right for a son to serve Mommy, Yu emphasized. Besides, who said that Mommy won't be able to see for the rest of her life? At the mention of this, Hua Jin furrowed his brows and asked worriedly, Oh yeah, did the doctor say when the surgery will be decided? The smile on Yin Shirshir's face stiffened slightly. Muyaja glanced at him and frowned. Suddenly he said, The doctor said that if we do the surgery now, the medication might affect the fetus in the womb. Why? Hua Jin did not know that much. He only knew that if he lost his sight, he could have a cornea transplant as soon as possible so that he could regain his sight. Because during the surgery, some of the drugs used will have a certain degree of toxicity. During a pregnant woman's pregnancy, there were some drugs that had to be avoided at all costs. Otherwise, it would easily affect the normal development of the fetus. In serious cases, miscarriages and deformities were possible. Shirshir wanted to protect the child. No matter what, even if she won't be able to see for the rest of her life, there's still me. Yin Shirshir smiled and interlocked her fingers with his. Her smile was gentle. Hua Jin furrowed his brows, looking worried. He clenched his fists and said hesitantly, A cornea donor should be something that can only be found by chance. I heard that there's a donor now, so we should be able to perform the surgery immediately. Muyaja was stunned for a moment. He looked up, and a strange look flashed across his face. He looked at Hua Jin deeply and thought about it for a while. Suddenly he asked, How do you know that there's a cornea donor now? Hua Jin wanted to say something but stopped. He glanced at Yin Shirshir but did not say anything in the end. He only said calmly, I just heard about it. Muyaja smiled and said casually, It's okay. There will always be a chance. Don't think too much. Hua Jin nodded absent-mindedly. Chapter 2940. After dinner, Yu and Xiaoyichen helped Yin Shirshir to go shopping. Muyaja and Hua Jin walked into the back garden one after the other. After a long silence, Muyaja suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around. His deep gaze fell on him as he asked suspiciously, When you mentioned the cornea donor just now, were you referring to the cornea donor Gu Xingzi donated? Hua Jin looked at him and was a little surprised. You know about this? Yes, I know. Muyaja nodded. Qinzhou talked to me about this matter. Back then, when Qinzhou was packing up Gu Xing's belongings, he found a few volunteer forms that Gu Xing's had filled out personally. It was a volunteer form for organ donation. Qinzhou could not help but be a little surprised. He did not know when Gu Xing's had signed this volunteer form. In addition to the liver and kidney, it also included a pair of corneas. Gu Xing's corneas. Initially, Qinzhou could not bear to see Gu Xing's leave this world in one piece. He could not bear to see Gu Xing's body being riddled with holes by those cold surgical machines after his death. Therefore, he had originally planned to burn these volunteer forms. However, in the end he thought of Yun Shirshir. If Gu Xing's organ donation could save other people's lives, wouldn't it be a special way to continue living in this world? Even if he left this world in one piece, he would only be burned to ashes in the end. If other patients were given a new lease of life because of his organ transplants, to Qinzhou, it was as if Gu Xing's had also been reborn. Therefore, he took the volunteer forms and went to the hospital. Soon the hospital dissected his body and removed the donated organs. Finally, they carefully removed his corneas. Qinzhou found Muyaja and gave him a suggestion. Before Xingzhe was born, he filled in a few donation applications. One of them was a pair of corneas. But time is of the essence. Unless Shirshir performs the surgery as soon as possible, I'm afraid there's no hope. Corneal transplantation was not as simple as it seemed. Donors were difficult to find because the current world's views were not so advanced. Most people were more conservative when it came to death. Furthermore, the donation form had to be filled in before death. In the eyes of the people, this was too unlucky. In addition, there were more and more patients with eye diseases, and there was a serious shortage of corneas. The reason why it was said to be a rare opportunity was that cornea transplants required a lot of time. Generally speaking, the cornea donor must be immediately stored in the preservation solution within 48 hours after removal, and put into surgery as soon as possible. Other than a few large cities, other small cities did not have any eye banks to store them. Therefore, once a cornea donor was found, surgery was needed immediately. Otherwise, the success rate of the surgery would be difficult to guarantee. Qinzhou hoped that he could use Xingzhe's cornea to restore Yun Shirshir's sight. I think Xingzhe must be very willing to use his cornea in exchange for Shirshir's sight, right? Shirshir can also take Xingzhe's place and see this prosperous world, Qinzhou said. Muyaja frowned. It had been 8 hours since the cornea was removed. In other words, the surgery had to be performed as soon as possible. But Chapter 2941. Qinzhou was puzzled. Chairman Mu, what are you thinking about? Don't you know that this is the best opportunity? You have to know that cornea donors are hard to come by. In addition, there's a strict time limit. The surgery can't be carried out immediately after finding a cornea donor. Or is it because this pair of corneas was removed from Xingzhe's eyes that you're upset about it? No. Muyaja smiled. He protected my woman. I have only respect and gratitude for him. I'm not so petty as to hold a grudge against a man who saved my woman's life. Qinzhou bit his lip. Then why don't you let Shirshir undergo the transplant? The pressure and guilt caused by Gu Xing's death has already crushed her. Muyaja sucked in a deep breath of cold air. She's pregnant now. The child in her belly is the only hope for her to pull herself together again. But if she undergoes the surgery now, the child will definitely be lost. If she's conscious, she won't bear to do it either. If the surgery is done without her knowing, she'll definitely break down if she finds out. The point is, I don't know how sad she'll be when she finds out one day that she can regain her sight because of Gu Xing's cornea donor. Qinzhou was speechless for a moment. Muyaja looked at Qinzhou deeply. You should know that she won't be able to accept such a thing. He left the world because of her. Yet he used his cornea to restore her sight. This is too heavy for her to bear. But Qinzhou was still a little hesitant. The doctor won't recommend the surgery if it's carried out immediately. Muyaja continued. She's not in a good mental state now. I'm afraid that it's dangerous. Qinzhou saw that Muyaja was persistent, so he gave up. Hua Jin was a little surprised when he heard this. You mean that the time limit of the cornea donor is tight? Once it's removed, the transplant must be carried out immediately. Before the surgery, we still need a day to prepare. Muyaja smiled faintly. There's not enough time. So, Huajin clenched his fists and was a little sad. Then Guxing's cornea now. I heard that it was transplanted to a 7-month-old child. Yes, a boy with a congenital cornea defect. Fortunately, this child and Guxing's are fated. The operation was very successful, and there were no signs of rejection. Muyaja pursed his lips. I remember that it was done in the same hospital. I went to see it on the day of the operation. The boy was very handsome. He was 6 months old, and had a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes. I heard that his name is Jingyang. This child had a pair of beautiful big eyes. Before entering the operating theater, when he was preparing for work, he was still smiling with his eyes narrowed. His eyes seemed to hide countless twinkling stars. When he grows up, he should be a handsome young man. Jingyang. Huajin muttered the name and suddenly smiled. That's good too. From the looks of it, this is a new lease of life for Guxingza. However, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. It was different from a person who was born blind. Yun Shirshir's vision was normal, but once she lost her vision and fell into desolate darkness, what kind of despair would that be? Chapter 2942. Huajin muttered the name and suddenly smiled. That's good too. From the looks of it, it's a new lease of life for Guxingza. However, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. It was different from people who were born blind. Yun Shirshir's vision was normal, but once she lost her vision and fell into darkness, what kind of despair would that be? Every time he saw her fumbling around while trying to take something out by herself, his heart ached when he saw that strenuous look on her face. However, every time he saw her sitting quietly on the sofa with her head lowered and caressing her lower abdomen lovingly, her entire body exuded a motherly glow that was gentle and warm. It's okay. In the future, there will always be a cornea donor. I'll pay more attention. Huajin said optimistically. It won't be too late to undergo the surgery after you give birth and your condition stabilizes. Okay. When Yun Shirshir and the 2 little kids returned home from their walk, Huajin had already washed the dishes. Xiao Yichen was full of praise. Uncle Huajin is so amazing. Your cooking skills are not bad, and you wash the dishes very cleanly. Huajin could not help but laugh when he heard that. He squatted down and reached out to pinch Xiao Yichen's pink cheeks. Do you really think that my cooking skills are good? Yes. I thought that your little mouth had been spoiled by Yu's cooking skills. I didn't expect that you wouldn't mind my cooking. Huajin heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. At the side, Yu said lightly, although the food you cook isn't that exquisite, it's still edible. Huajin was speechless. Yun Shirshir was amused and laughed. Yu, don't be too picky. Do you think everyone is like you? You were born with an innate sense for delicious food. Yu proudly crossed his arms, feeling a little smug. Muyaja snorted coldly. I'm wondering if you have a genetic mutation. Because I'm very particular about food. Yu said proudly. Who's like Xiao Yichen? He said that the fried rice was delicious. Ahem. Yun Shirshir awkwardly cleared her throat. That was a long time ago. Once on a whim, she cooked a plate of egg fried rice and asked the 2 little fellows to eat. When Yu saw that the fried rice was overcooked, she pushed the fried rice to the side in disgust. Then she saw Xiao Yichen hugging the fried rice and eating a lot of it. When he was done, he even smiled and said, Mommy's cooking is amazing. The fried rice is so delicious. She didn't know if he was speaking the truth. He couldn't stand the fried rice, or if he thought that it was disgusting. However, to protect his mommy's reputation, he reluctantly pretended that it was delicious. Xiao Yichen argued, Mommy's fried rice is really not bad. He really couldn't tell that the fried rice was overcooked. Moreover, he was starving that day and only focused on eating the rice. He didn't think that there was anything strange about the taste. Yun Shirshir immediately raised her hands in surrender. Okay. Yu, you're the best at cooking. Mommy's cooking isn't as good as yours. Are you satisfied now? Yu was satisfied when he heard this. He felt that this way he would be able to secure his position as the head chef in the family. He looked pleased with himself. Muyaja and Huajin looked at each other and laughed helplessly. Hua Jin deliberately teased him. Yu, it's not good for you to be so full of yourself. You're just good at cooking. What's so special about that? Yu gave him a proud look. Chapter 29:43. The next day, for some reason, Hua Jin went to the hospital to inquire about Jing Yang's condition. He saw the child through the window in the general ward on the 4th floor. It had been more than half a month since the cornea transplant. The child was recovering very quickly and had been transferred from the intensive care unit to the general ward. He would be discharged soon. The child was very beautiful. His skin was fair and clean, so tender that it looked like it could be broken by the wind. He had a pair of big, watery eyes and long eyelashes. They were as thick as the feathers of a black phoenix. When he blinked, they looked like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. This child was really beautiful. If he didn't say so, Hua Jin would have thought that he was a girl. When he smiled, 2 small dimples appeared on his cheeks. It was very seductive. He was lost in thought as he looked through the window. Suddenly, a timid voice came from the side. Hello, you are. Hua Jin turned his head and saw a 21-year-old girl standing by the side trembling. She was dressed very plainly. She wore a white blouse and a pair of washed-out jeans. Her black hair was gently tied up with a hairband. However, even though she was dressed plainly, it still couldn't hide her clear and bright temperament. She was very beautiful. She belonged to the delicate and pretty type. She had beautiful big eyes, a high nose bridge and handsome facial features. Hua Jin sized her up and immediately guessed her identity. Are you Jing Yang's mother? The girl was so shocked that her eyes widened. She was a little surprised. How did you know? Because your eyes look very similar, don't you? The girl smiled and blushed shyly. She asked carefully, then who are you? She obviously didn't recognize him. It was obvious that she didn't pay much attention to the entertainment industry and didn't watch many entertainment programs and dramas. Hua Jin smiled faintly. I'm Gu Xing's friend. Gu. Ah. The girl was so shocked that she covered her mouth like a frightened deer. Then her eyes became wet. She pursed her lips and said gratefully, if you're Gu Xing's friend, you must be a big star too. Yes. As Hua Jin spoke, he glanced through the window at the giraffe plushie lying on the hospital bed and smiled. I'm here to take a look at the child. Okay, please come in. The girl welcomed him into the ward enthusiastically. Hua Jin didn't stand on ceremony. He entered the ward and sat by the bed. After chatting for a while, Hua Jin found out her name. Jingqi. A simple but pleasant name. Previously, Qin Zhou had wanted to transplant Gu Xing's cornea to Yun Shishir, but because she was pregnant, he could not do the surgery immediately. Hence, he found the child through the hospital. Jingqi rushed to the hospital and understood the situation. When she heard that there was a cornea donor, she was excited but asked fearfully, how much is the surgery fee? About 40 to 50,000. When she heard this, her heart hung high, and she felt very uneasy for a moment. She couldn't afford that much money and was worried about how to gather the money. She didn't know who Gu Xingze was. She didn't usually watch television. She worked in the factory for 13 hours a day. Chapter 29:44. Qin Zhou learned about this situation. Coincidentally, Gu Xingze had a sum of money that was specially used for public welfare. In addition to the donation form, Gu Xingze also filled in the donation form for special funds for surgery. In other words, he had given a sum of money for the organ transplant surgery that he had donated to families who felt that it was difficult to pay for the surgery. When Qin Zhou mentioned this to Jingqi felt especially guilty. After repeated insistence, she wrote an IOU and gave it to Qin Zhou. She also said solemnly, no matter what, I have to return this money. Although I don't know when I'll be able to repay it, I'll try my best to repay it. The surgery was very successful. Jing Yang's vitality was especially strong. Other than his congenital eye disease, his small body was very healthy. This little guy especially loved to laugh. He had a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. When he smiled, it was warm, as if countless twinkling stars were hidden in them. The moment the gauze was removed, the 7-month-old child let out a bell-like laugh when he saw the nurse's face. The nurses especially liked this little guy. Why does this little guy like to laugh so much? He can't stop laughing. It's too funny. During the surgery, I didn't see him cry even when he was anesthetized. I heard from his mother that when he was born, he was different from other children. When other children come out, they cry loudly. What about him? When the nurse who delivered the baby patted his butt, he immediately laughed. That's really rare. Hua Jin looked at the boy who was being teased by the nurse and refused to let go of the doll. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. So cute. Thank you, Jing Qi said politely. She nervously fiddled with her palms and then said gratefully, I never dared to hope that the child could recover his vision, because the cost of the surgery is too high. It costs tens of thousands. Our family can't afford so much money. Hua Jin could not help but feel a little strange. He looked around and saw that there was no one else in the ward except her. He could not help but ask curiously, Where's your husband? Jing Qi was embarrassed for a moment and immediately said, He's quite busy and rarely has time to take care of us. Oh, I see. Seeing that she didn't want to talk about it, he didn't ask anymore. After the child was born, we were diagnosed with an eye disease. We have been waiting for a cornea donor. But I didn't expect that I would be so lucky. The opportunity came so quickly that I didn't have time to prepare the surgery fees. However, 40 to 50,000 yuan was an astronomical figure for her. After 6 months of scrimping and saving, she only managed to save a little more than 10,000 yuan. She was already trying her best to save money. She couldn't possibly skimp on the child's expenses. She was worried that the child wouldn't develop well. Her monthly salary at the factory was more than 4,000 yuan. After deducting her expenses and the fact that she had a child, it was another large sum of expenses. She had worked so hard to save up that much. She had hoped that when she had a cornea donor, she would be able to save enough money for the surgery. But unexpectedly, 6 months later, there was news that suddenly came. After she received the call from the hospital, she didn't have time to think. She took a taxi to the hospital with the child and did a series of tests. Because if he missed it, he didn't know when the next opportunity would come. Chapter 29:45. At first, I was worried that the child was too young and did not have the conditions to undergo surgery. However, after the examination, the child could undergo surgery. I was hot-headed and thought that no matter what, I had to seize this opportunity, so I didn't think too much about it and signed it. Later, I realized that I was so flustered that I didn't consider the surgery fees. If it weren't for Xiao Qin's care, perhaps Are there very few cornea donors? Hua Jin suddenly asked curiously. Jing Qi was stunned and nodded. Yes, the supply and demand are very tight. After all, there are many people with eye diseases now, but there are very few donors. I heard that in the past, the source of corneas came from prisoners on death row in prison, but now the law doesn't allow it. Therefore, only those who voluntarily donate are very rare. Hua Jin was stunned. If it were my child, I would be willing to exchange my cornea for it. Of course. Jing Qi smiled. When the child was born, it was found that there was a problem with his eyes and he needed a cornea transplant. I asked if I could use my cornea, but the doctor said that this is not allowed by the law. It's illegal. Why? Because the cornea of a living person is not allowed to be donated. In other words, even if I was willing, the hospital has no right to perform such a surgery. Why? Hua Jin was a little agitated. Why is it illegal? Can't I donate it willingly? No, it's the same in other countries. Because it's very unfair to remove the cornea from a living person's eyes and use one person's light to exchange for another person's light. Hua Jin was stunned, and his heart clenched tightly. He had originally planned to wait until Yun Shirshir could undergo surgery before secretly going to the hospital to remove his cornea in exchange for her light. He had asked around in the past and found out that one cornea could restore the light of 2 people. However, now that he learned from Jing Qi that living people could not donate their corneas, he could not help but feel disappointed. After leaving the ward, Hua Jin absent-mindedly stood at the entrance of the hospital. He hailed a cab and arrived at Yun Shanshi. Yun Shirshir had given him the key to Yun Shirshir's house. When he opened the door and walked in quietly, he saw Yun Shirshir holding a watering can and groping her way to the back garden. He followed her quietly and saw how slowly she walked. Beside her, the servant followed her carefully, not daring to reach out to support her. She had a strong personality and wanted to do everything by herself. She would only seek help from the servants if it was a particularly difficult matter. Muyaja meticulously rearranged the furnishings in the house. The angular furniture was wrapped in soft cushions. It must have been hard on him to be so attentive, worrying that she would bump into something because she couldn't see. Therefore, the corners of the table, the corners of the wall, everything that had edges and corners, were covered with soft cushions. Even if he bumped into it, it wouldn't hurt. The servant saw him and was about to announce his arrival when Huajin immediately shushed her, indicating for her not to disturb him. She slowly moved to the door, kicked her toes and stepped over the threshold. Only then did she reach the back garden unimpeded. She walked to the flower bed and carefully watered the Chinese roses. Chapter 2946. Huajin walked to the door and saw her carefully holding onto the flowers and watering them nonchalantly. He walked over quietly, but before he could take a few steps, he alarmed the person who was carefully watering the flowers. "Who's there?" Yin Shirshir turned her head and looked in the direction of the footsteps. Ever since her eyesight went bad, her other senses had become extremely sensitive, especially her hearing. Thus, she caught the subtle sound of the footsteps in an instant. Huajin stopped in his tracks but didn't say anything. Just as the servant was about to speak, Huajin immediately put a finger to his lips and motioned for her not to make a sound. Yin Shirshir raised her eyebrows. She immediately guessed that the person who came must be playing a game of identifying people. She curled her lips and narrowed her eyes as she smiled. "Huajin, stop fooling around." "Ah." Huajin widened his eyes in surprise. He smiled as he walked to her side and squatted down nimbly. "How did you know it was me?" "Your footsteps are so heavy. It can't be you or Xiaoyichen. Other than him, you're the only one who can enter and leave this manor at will." After pausing for a moment, Yin Shirshir smiled faintly. "However, he's not like you. He doesn't know how to play such a boring game." Huajin stuck out his tongue. "Sister, you're amazing. They say that pregnancy makes a woman stupid for 3 years. That's not true. You've become much smarter after getting pregnant." Yin Shirshir raised her hand symbolically and pretended to hit him. She said angrily, "I've always been smart, okay? Don't spout nonsense." As she said this, she turned her head again and continued what she was doing in a serious manner. Huajin stayed by her side quietly. He didn't know why, but he really enjoyed this quiet moment. He watched in a daze as Yin Shirshir carefully watered the flowers. She was afraid that she would water them wrongly. She even carefully held the flower branch with one hand and held the watering can with the other, sprinkling the water with a sizzling sound. Huajin looked at the side of her face. It was peaceful and warm. Even though her eyes were blind and unfocused, the gentleness in her eyes was something he had never seen before. Ever since that incident, due to her pregnancy and poor eyesight, she had stopped all her work and quietly stayed at home to nurse her pregnancy. Other than work, he would come here to accompany her. Staying by her side, no matter how irritable his heart was, it would instantly calm down and soothe him. As she watered the flowers, Yin Shirshir asked curiously, "You seem to be very free recently. Didn't you take on any jobs?" Huajin said matter-of-factly, "Of course. I've accepted quite a few jobs." I can't tell." Yin Shirshir put down the watering can and stood up. She turned around and groped with her hands, trying to sit down. Huajin immediately helped her sit down. "Since you said that you've accepted so many jobs, why do I feel that you don't seem to be busy when you keep coming here for no reason?" Huajin said unhappily, "Isn't that just to spend more time with you? Other than work, I spend the rest of my time here." This villa was huge and had many empty rooms. Muyaja had specially arranged a room for Huajin to stay here. After all, he also had a lot of work to do. He felt more at ease letting Huajin spend more time with her. At first, Huajin felt a little awkward. He felt that he wasn't staying here like a third wheel. However, Yin Shirshir also said that he should stay here peacefully and treat them as a family. Chapter 2947. Only then did Huajin feel less burdened. Usually, when he was busy with work, Huajin would stay in a nearby hotel. When he was free, he would stay at Yin Shanshir to accompany her. Yin Shirshir smiled contentedly. "Should I be touched?" "You should be touched. In order to accompany you, I pushed away a lot of work. As Huajin spoke, he covered the back of her hand. Didn't I say before that if you can't see, I'll be your eyes? Yes, I remember. Yin Shirshir paused. That's good too. After all, if you take on too much work, your body won't be able to take it. Huajin snorted aggrievedly. I still have to take care of work. If I don't earn money, who's going to support me? Yin Shirshir deliberately teased him. I'll support you. No way. You're still relying on brother-in-law to support you. Moreover, you're a man, not a gigolo who lives off a woman. I don't want to rely on a woman to support me. Huajin said. Yin Shirshir smiled and changed the topic. Suddenly she asked, Where did you go today? Huajin was stunned. He didn't intend to hide it and said slowly, I went to the hospital today. The hospital? Yin Shirshir was nervous. Why did you go to the hospital? Are you feeling unwell? No. I just went to visit a child. A child? Yes. Huajin paused and pondered for a moment. Then he asked slowly, Did brother-in-law mention the name Jingyang to you? Jingyang. Yin Shirshir looked confused. No. Did you know? When Qinzhou was tidying up Gu Xingza's belongings, he found out that Senior Gu Xingza had filled in the volunteer form for organ donation when he was alive. Jingyang received Gu Xingza's cornea as a donor and went through the surgery successfully. I saw this little guy today. He's very beautiful and has recovered well, especially his big eyes. They're so beautiful. The smile on Yin Shirshir's face froze, and her eyes couldn't help but blink out. Huajin saw her expression and suddenly became nervous. What's wrong? Sister, it's been so long. You should let go of Senior Xingza, right? Ever since that incident, everyone has kept the words Gu Xingza a secret. Although I feel that there are too many regrets, we can't always be obsessed with the past, right? Yin Shirshir's pupils dilated. Huajin held her hand tightly. His handsome brows furrowed slightly as he said with heartache, Let it go. Is that okay? Even though I know that you can't be so free and easy, it might be a little difficult. However, no matter what, you have to face it. The person who is no longer here is no longer here. The reason why I mention this child to you is because I want you to know that although Senior Xingzha is no longer here, he has obtained a new life in this world in another way. Huajin. Yin Shirshir held his hand and calmly reassured him. Don't worry. I won't make you guys worry like I used to. Upon hearing this, Huajin was still skeptical. Really? Chapter 2948. Sister. The more Huajin looked at her, the more his heart ached for her. He hugged her tightly and said with a sobbing tone, Senior Xingza's death is really not your responsibility. Don't torture yourself, and don't live in guilt. I think that if you truly love someone and give up for love, you will definitely not ask for anything in return. Gu Xingza treats you well out of his own accord, and he has no regrets. He treats you like his life, so he definitely wants you to be well. I understand. Yin Shirshir hugged his shoulders gently and choked. I understand. So I'll be well, I'll be well. Huajin wiped her tears away, but heard her say, I want to see that child. Seeing that he was silent, Yin Shirshir pleaded, Just once is good. I want to see him. I can take you to see him, but you have to wait until tomorrow at least. Huajin explained. When I left the hospital, the child was already asleep. After all, he's only 7 months old and needs to rest well. Yin Shirshir nodded. The next day, Huajin turned down an interview and brought her to the hospital. When they arrived at the ward, Jingqi was not in. Huajin guessed that she was probably going through the discharge procedures. Jingqi said that the child had recovered very well, so there was no need for him to stay in the hospital any longer. Every day he stayed in the hospital would be a day's worth of expenses. The doctor had already hinted that the child could be discharged, so she planned to go through the discharge procedures as soon as possible. Pushing open the door of the ward, Huajin held her hand and walked in quietly. On the hospital bed, the child's eyes were wide open. He blinked and looked at the world curiously. Huajin had specially brought a gift for the little guy this time, a pink unicorn plush toy from Leji. Approaching the bed, Huajin helped Yin Shirshir sit down. He leaned over to look at the little guy and said gently, Uncle is here to see you again. Are you surprised? Yaya. The child stretched out his hand and pointed a tender finger at him, his eyes wide open in curiosity. Hua Jin gave him a thumbs up, and then placed the unicorn beside him. Yu Yu's unicorn was not big. It was a medium-sized unicorn. Based on Yu Yu's height, she could hold it with one hand. However, the little guy was only 7 months old after all. When he opened his arms, he happened to be hugged tightly. It could be seen that the little guy especially liked this furry toy. He hugged it and rolled around on the bed. The 7-month-old child had already learned to crawl around on the bed, and was especially good at tormenting himself. Yin Shirshir could not see. She could only hear a series of bell-like laughter coming from the bed. It was extremely pleasing to the ear. The crisp laughter was like the clear spring of a mountain stream, but also like the sound of wind chimes. When she heard this, she couldn't help but smile. Jingqi finished the discharge procedures and walked into the ward. When she saw that it was Hua Jin, she was about to smile. However, when she saw the unfamiliar person sitting by the window, she was stunned. Although she looked unfamiliar, when she looked carefully, she felt that she was familiar, as if she had seen her somewhere before. She suddenly recalled that she seemed to have seen this woman in an advertisement when she was at the bus stop. The endorsement was for a high-end cosmetics brand. This cosmetics brand was especially expensive. When she was shopping in the mall, she had seen this counter in the cosmetics area on the first floor. On the counter, there was also a poster of this woman. Chapter 2949. Her name was Yin Shirshir. However, at this moment, she wasn't wearing elegant makeup like in the pictures. Instead, she was barefaced. When she left the house, she had only washed her face. Hua Jin saw that the sun was very strong today, so he dragged her back and applied sunscreen on her. Hence, he didn't recognize her at first glance. After the makeup, there was still an obvious difference, but it didn't detract from her beauty at all. Sorry to disturb you again. When Hua Jin saw her, he immediately stood up and greeted her politely. Not at all. I'm very grateful that you could come and visit Yang Yang. Jingqi glanced at the little guy on the bed who was hugging a toy. She immediately guessed who had given him the toy. Hello. Yin Shirshir also greeted her. Are you Jing Yang's mother? Yes. Can I carry the little guy? Yin Shirshir asked with a gentle smile. Although Jingqi found it strange, she didn't stop her. Instead, she smiled and said, Okay, but be careful. This little guy is still a little heavy. Hua Jin carried Jingyang to Yin Shirshir. Yin Shirshir reached out and hugged the little guy. Seeing that she couldn't see, Jingqi was slightly surprised. She opened her mouth but didn't ask anything. The little guy was in Yin Shirshir's arms, but surprisingly he didn't feel shy. He only opened his eyes wide and looked at her curiously. His 2 little hands were probing. First he touched her hair. Then his big eyes were attracted by the necklace on Yin Shirshir's neck, so he reached out to grab it. The child was small and didn't know what to do. He was a little strong. When Jingqi saw this, she rebuked, Yang Yang, be good. Don't move. Yin Shirshir immediately said, It's okay. She couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Because she couldn't see, she couldn't take a good look at the child in front of her. However, hugging the soft little cub, it was as if she had returned to a few years ago when Yu was just born. His body was also small and soft, as if he was made of water or glutinous rice balls. It was as if he could be flattened and rounded at will. She hugged him carefully. Although she was a little unfamiliar with the way she carried the child, she was professional enough. One look, and one could tell that she had been a mother. The little fellow became even more intimate with her. It felt so comfortable being hugged by her. Its pair of eyes were curved like crescent moons as it giggled and babbled. Who knew what it was talking about? Hua Jin replied. The operation went very smoothly. There were no signs of rejection. The little guy's eyes are especially beautiful. When he grows up, he should be as handsome as me. Shameless, she retorted. He'll definitely be more handsome than you. Sister, you're so biased. My face is praised by my fans as the most beautiful woman in the world. You're a little fresh meat now, but in a few years, won't you also become old cured meat? No matter how beautiful you are, you'll still get old. As she spoke, she ruffled his silky hair and smiled. This little guy is so tender that I can squeeze water out of him. Jingqi asked carefully. Are you friends with Mr. Gu Xingze? Yin Shishir smiled, but it was a little bitter. Yes. Chapter 2950. Yin Shishir said, I'm not a big star. I only entered this industry because of my love for performing. Jingqi could not help but feel a little touched. She had heard that big stars were very good at acting like big shots and putting on airs. After all, they had always been under the spotlight. The love of their fans, the flowers and applause, and their annual income was tens of millions. Even Gu Xingze's annual income was in the hundreds of millions. Therefore, these big stars were definitely superior to others. Therefore, when she first saw Yin Shishir, Jingqi could not help but feel a little uneasy and at a loss. At the same time, she felt a little inferior and looked up to her. However, Yin Shishir's easygoing nature surprised and touched her. She did not put on airs at all. When she said that she was not a big star, she was definitely not hypocritical. Deep down, she thought that she was just an ordinary person. You're different from other celebrities. Jingqi smiled. You're so famous, but you don't put on airs when you talk to me. As she spoke, she walked over and asked with concern. I wanted to ask just now. Your eyes. Are they injured? I think you can't see anything? Yin Shishir said calmly, yes. My eyes are a little injured and I can't see anything. Is that so? Jingqi furrowed her brows in confusion. She was meticulous and seemed to have thought of something. She asked strangely, Aren't you Gu Xingze's friend? Then, when he donated his cornea back then, you could have accepted his cornea as a donor for the transplant. Yin Shishir did not say anything. Jingqi could not help but ask sensitively. Am I being nosy? I'm sorry. I'm a boorish person and I don't know how to talk. Sometimes, it's clearly a sentence of concern, but when it comes out of my mouth, it doesn't sound good. It's a little harsh. Don't take it to heart. If I'm being nosy, I won't ask. No, Yin Shishir said lightly. I can't undergo the surgery now because I'm pregnant. If I undergo the surgery, it won't be good for the fetus. I want to protect the child. Let's put the matter of my eyes aside for now. I see. So that's how it is. She cursed silently in her heart. This beautiful superstar should be very good friends with Gu Xingze. This was because when she saw Yin Shishir holding the child, the look in her eyes was not just pure love. Instead, it was a kind of pity, pain, and even longing. She clearly couldn't see, but her gaze seemed to be able to see something through the child. Yin Shishir lovingly hugged Jingyang in her arms, but Jingqi knew in her heart that the longing and heartache on her face was not because of her love for the child. She didn't understand if this was a disguised form of entrusting. She placed her longing for Gu Xingze on this child. Jingqi came back to her senses and said with a smile, Congratulations! You're going to be a mother. Yin Shishir smiled. Thank you. She suddenly turned her head and gently stroked the little fellow's face. Her eyes inevitably revealed some regret. What a pity. I can't see. Otherwise, I could have taken a good look at what the little fellow looks like. In the future, when your eyes recover and the little fellow grows up, I'll definitely hold his hand and show him to you so that you can have a good look. Chapter 2951. Yin Shishir smiled when she heard that. Well, that's good too. Jingqi added. Although cornea donors are hard to find, you're different from us. If you have a wide network, you'll have many channels to obtain cornea donors. Yin Shishir only nodded but didn't say anything. In fact, for the former Muyaja, the Mu Corporation had so many medical industries under its name. It could be said that it controlled a wide range of resources. But it was different now. After Muyaja left, the Mu Corporation completely removed him from the Mu family. What did that mean? Even his name wasn't on the family tree. Therefore, most of the Mu Corporation's medical resources were still in the hands of the Mu Corporation. The Xingyu Corporation was a financial consortium and real estate company. Recently, it had made a bold move into the internet industry and established internet technology. However, the only thing that he was concerned about was the Mu Corporation's medical industry. Muyaja had always been ambitious and coveted the Mu Corporation's medical industry. He wanted to annex it and take it for himself. However, this was not something that could be done in a short period of time. However, Yin Shishir was optimistic about regaining her sight. No matter what, she would live well. After leaving the hospital, Hua-jin helped Yun Shirshir into the car. It was not until they got into the car that Hua-jin heaved a sigh of relief. Why are you sighing? Yun Shirshir laughed at him. Hua-jin muttered. Fortunately, the scene I imagined didn't happen. What scene? Hua-jin said awkwardly. To tell you the truth, I thought that when I brought you to the hospital and imagined you hugging the child, you'd definitely burst into tears. You'd cry so hard that you'd be out of breath and the world would turn dark again. Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. Am I that pretentious? Hua-jin glanced at her from the corner of his eyes as if he was silently teasing her. Yun Shirshir retorted. I'm not that weak. Why not? Hua-jin said aggrievedly. You don't know this, but at that time, because of Xingzhe, you didn't have any appetite and couldn't sleep. You felt empty as if your soul had left your body. Qinzhou brought over the videotape that Xingzhe had recorded before he was born. Brother-in-law had only just started playing it, and you were already crying like a broken dam. You don't know that when he sees you cry, even the Gongjie secretly wipes his eyes. Mr. Gongjie? Yun Shirshir's face twitched again. What is this? Why do you call him that? That's because he looks so fierce. I feel that if I call him by his name, he will be angry, so I always call him Lord Gongjie. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but imagine that Gongjie had his hands on his hips and looked arrogant. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Hua-jin grumbled. All right, don't make fun of me. It's my fault for being so afraid of him. In the future, if Xiaojie bullies you or gives you attitude, I will definitely back you up. Don't. I can't bear the responsibility. When Hua-jin heard this, his face turned pale and he trembled. Yun Shirshir looked confused. Why? She didn't know why, but she felt that Hua-jin had an inexplicable fear and apprehension towards Gongjie. Was it necessary? He made Xiaojie seem like a demon king. You don't know, right? When he found out that you acknowledged me as your brother, he couldn't stand the sight of me. When? Chapter 2952. When Hua-jin talked about the past, he felt so sad that he wanted to wipe away his tears. When you were asleep, he made things difficult for me. When we ordered takeout together, I could only eat vegetarian food, and he only allowed me to eat half a bowl of rice. When I wanted to stay by your side, he chased me away. When I refused to leave, he grabbed me by the collar and asked me to go home. When I washed some clothes for you, he stood by the side and glared at me like a tiger watching its prey. That was unbelievable. Yun Shirshir never knew that Xiaojie could be so jealous. All right. Don't be afraid of him. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Both of them are my favorite younger brothers. I love them both, regardless of who they are or who they are. Hua-jin smiled contentedly. Oh, by the way, why don't we eat out tonight? Yu and Xiaoyichen went on a spring outing, so they won't be back for dinner. I can't be bothered to prepare dinner. Okay, but you have to inform your brother-in-law first. Hua-jin nodded. Okay, I'll call him now. Muyaja received a call from Hua-jin. Hua-jin said that Yun Shirshir rarely went out, so he took her out to walk around and bask in the sun. After that, they settled dinner outside. He was a little worried and asked a lot of questions. Hua-jin comforted him, saying that they had brought enough people with them for this trip, so there was no need to worry about any danger. Muyaja was relieved. Come back early. Yes, sir. After Hua-jin hung up the phone, Muyaja raised his wrist to look at the time. It was already 4 in the afternoon. He tidied up the table and called Lu Jinyu. After handing over some simple tasks to him, he drove out of the office. Naturally, he did not go home immediately. Instead, he drove to another villa. The villas in Yulong Bay were once developed by the Mu Group. Back then, he had already started to secretly set up his own company. In order to raise funds, he had acquired a few properties and conducted 2 rounds of financing. After the financing, the properties were vacant, and he was not in a hurry to sell them. After all, the value of real estate was very high, and it was also convenient for financing and investment. The reason he'd rushed to Imperial Dragon Bay was none other than because he'd arranged for Yin Na to stay here some time ago. Muyaja parked the car in the basement and got out. He walked to a shutter door and pressed the password. The door slowly opened. The villa had a total of 6 floors, and 2 of them were basements. The first basement was the garage, and the second basement was a very large storage warehouse. Yun Na was then settled in the warehouse. The warehouse was temporarily remodeled. A bed and some furnishings were added. A stainless steel cell door was welded to the inside of the door. Usually, there were 5 people taking turns to guard it. When Muyaja walked in, Yun Na was tied to the bed. She had just been injected with a sedative. She kept struggling and screaming. Her throat was hoarse from crying at the top of her lungs, as if countless gravel had accumulated in her throat. She changed her clothes every 3 days. Sometimes, the guards were impatient and could not be bothered with her. After being imprisoned for so long, she had almost never taken a shower. Hence, her hair was messy and her face was dirty. On her face, there were bloodstains from her scratches. To prevent her from escaping, her wrists and ankles were handcuffed. Chapter 2953. Yun Na heard the sound of someone walking in, and immediately turned her head. However, because she was sedated, her body was weak. This was also related to the fact that she had not eaten for many days. She had been on a hunger strike for 4 days. Therefore, these people who were watching over her tied her to the bed, so that they could inject her with a nutrient drip. At first, she was still willing to eat some things. After all, her desire to live had won over everything. She did not want to die. Being locked up in such a confined space for a long time with no one to respond to his cries for help, it was very difficult for him to maintain a good mental state. Therefore, Yun Na could not help but feel a little tormented, and actually started to go on a hunger strike. After not eating for 4 days, she had lost a lot of weight and was extremely weak. In order to ensure that her life was maintained, they had no choice but to tie her to the bed. When he walked in, the needle was just inserted into her blood vessel. "It's you. It's you." When Yun Na saw him, she started to struggle crazily. Her eyes were bloodshot, so red that it seemed like blood could drip out. Muyaja ignored her struggle. He glanced at his subordinates and questioned, "What's wrong with her?" "Chairman Mu, she refuses to eat. She has been on a hunger strike for a long time." "Hunger strike?" Muyaja laughed coldly. "You're quite capable. Hunger strike? Was she protesting against house arrest?" "Muyaja." Yun Na glared at him with red eyes. Her face was ferocious as she asked aggressively, "What do you want? Now that I'm in your hands, you can kill me or torture me as you wish." "Kill me or torture me as you wish." Muyaja curled his lips mockingly. "What a good as you wish." He paused for a moment, and suddenly walked to the front of the bed. He lowered his head and lightly sized her up, the smile in his eyes growing deeper. "However, I won't kill you." "What?" In shock, Yun Na widened her eyes in shock and looked at him in disbelief. Muyaja said, "Don't worry, I won't let you die." Yun Na's expression changed. Won't let her die? Then, in the end, Yun Na couldn't figure out what he was up to. This man was extremely black-bellied. Originally, she thought that if she was taken away by him, he would definitely use all kinds of methods to make her suffer so much that she would wish she was dead. He would use all kinds of cruel and crazy methods to torture and humiliate her. However, it didn't happen. He had only imprisoned her in darkness, but he had not done anything to harm her. Why? She caused Yun Shirshir to become like that and Gu Xingzi to die. In his eyes, she had committed a heinous crime. He should hate her to the core. But now, he was saying that he wanted to keep her alive. In the end, Yun Na could not understand or guess this extremely shrewd man. "What are you trying to do?" she asked warily. "You don't need to know." Muyaja could not be bothered with her. He was only here to check on her condition. Seeing that she wasn't half dead like he had imagined, at least it meant that her will to live was strong enough. "Keep an eye on her," Muyaja instructed again, and then turned to leave. Behind him, Yun Na asked hysterically, "What do you want?" "Muyaja, kill me?" "With your methods, why don't you give me a quick death?" Muyaja stopped in his tracks, and a thick aura of viciousness appeared on his back. "Give you a quick death." Chapter 2954. He laughed mockingly and glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. He said coldly, "There's something that I haven't gotten back from you yet. Don't even think about it." Yun Na was stunned when she heard that. She was a little confused by the thing he was referring to. What thing? What exactly did he say that he wanted to get back from her? What is it? However, Muyaja wasn't in a hurry to respond to her bewilderment. You don't need to know. His back was facing her, but it was obvious that he didn't want to waste too much time on her. He was only here to check on her condition. Seeing that she was in good condition, he didn't plan to stay any longer. The cell door was locked from the inside. Yun now looked at his retreating figure in panic and despair. She asked hysterically, "What exactly is it? Tell me. Tell me. Muyaja. You bastard. Why are you imprisoning me here? What's your motive? Answer me." The only response she got was the heavy sound of the shutter door closing. With a loud bang, the door fell heavily on the ground. Darkness enveloped her, as if she was isolated from the world. She clenched her fists tightly, but there was no room for her to struggle. Her expression was twisted, like a trapped beast. Muyaja had just gotten into the car when his cell phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone, and saw that it was Lu Jinyu. He frowned and picked up the call. "Hello. Boss, I heard that sister-in-law isn't home for dinner tonight." "Yeah." Muyaja couldn't help but be surprised. He didn't mention this to him. When Huajin called, he happened to be standing by the side. He probably heard that Yin Shirshir wasn't home for dinner through the phone. "What's the matter?" Lu Jinyu chuckled evilly and said seductively, "It's rare that sister-in-law isn't home. Since there's already someone taking care of her, why don't you come with us to have some fun?" Muyaja frowned and looked at the phone screen in disdain. He knew that Lu Jinyu wouldn't call him for anything good. No. As he spoke, he was about to hang up. Lu Jinyu hurriedly said, "Chief, don't hang up. Sigh. Actually, I'm doing this for your sake. Look, eldest sister-in-law has been pregnant for so long, so you must be reluctant to touch her. No man can resist not having sex for so long, right? Boss, you're also a man. Don't you have any needs? As your little brother, I'm also very good at dealing with matters. I'll definitely try my best to satisfy you. You're here because of this?" Muyaja sneered. He wondered what Lu Jinyu's motive for calling him was. So it was to tease him. As a subordinate, of course I have to be considerate of my superior. Boss, I'm also a man, so I understand that feeling. If he really couldn't hold it in any longer, there was no need to hold it in. Don't worry. If you go out to have fun, we will definitely keep this matter a secret. Only Jiang Shun and I know, but no one else knows. Muyaja only asked in return, "Do you still want next month's bonus?" Bonus. To Lu Jinyu this was a huge threat. Given his position as the second in command of Xingyu Financial Corporation, his salary was fixed, but the monthly dividends were not cheap. Chapter 2955. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end, and he immediately corrected himself. "Boss, I was just joking. Why did you take it so seriously? I was just testing on behalf of sister-in-law to see if you're honest enough. Hehe. I wanted to test if boss is loyal to sister-in-law." Muyaja smiled and asked, "Have you gotten the results of your test? Do you even need to ask?" Boss was absolutely loyal to his sister-in-law. "Alright. Boss, you're busy. Jiang Shun and I are free to do whatever we want." After he finished speaking, he hurriedly hung up the phone. Muyaja threw his cell phone aside and drove home. When he got home, Huajin and Yin Shirshir were still not home. Yu and Xiao Yichen had gone for an outing and were not back yet. It was rare for the house to be so empty. He walked into the study and took out a stack of books from the drawer. They were all topics related to motherhood, childcare, and pregnancy. He had secretly bought a large stack of books on this topic behind Yin Shirshir's back, especially on prenatal education and childcare. There were all sorts of books. He had not had the time to read them, and he did not know if he could make up for it in time, or if it would be of any use. Usually he would be too embarrassed to take out these books and read them openly in front of Yin Shirshir. Especially when Yu and Xiao Yichen were around. He would hide these books very well. He was afraid that the two little guys would laugh at him if they saw them. When Yin Shirshir was pregnant with Yu and Xiao Yichen, he was not by her side. At that time, other than that night when he went to visit her and successfully got pregnant, he did not appear in front of her again. He vaguely remembered that when she was pregnant, she had attended some prenatal education classes. At that time, they had played Mozart's music and Chopin's piano pieces. However, when Xiao Yichen grew up, he did not seem to have any talent or luck in music. Instead, he was tone-deaf. Looking at Yu, he did not seem to be any better. This point was a little strange. Although he wasn't particularly talented in singing, at least he had a good grasp of the 5 tones. Yin Shishi's voice was very pleasant to listen to, and when she sang, she was also quite good. Why was it that when it came to these 2 fellows, they were tone-deaf? Could it be that the prenatal education was not done well? Some time ago, Yin Shishi pestered him to read bedtime stories. However, it wasn't for Yu and Xiao Yichen, but for the little guy in her stomach. Mu Yaja muttered, "Can she hear you?" Yin Shishi felt so wrong that the rims of her eyes turned red. He was flustered to coax her, but in the end, he didn't know what he had said wrong to make her suddenly like this. The next day, he specially consulted a new nanny who was one of his employees. As someone who had been through this before, this stay-at-home dad boasted. He said that when a pregnant woman was pregnant, her emotions would fluctuate easily. She would often cry at the slightest thing and become agitated. When Mu Yaja heard this, he was confused and stunned. In the end, the employee cautiously asked, "Boss, the knowledge of being a stay-at-home dad is very particular." Then he instilled some information into him. Which family's wife did not do well during her confinement? Her health deteriorated greatly and she often caught colds. Which family's child did not take good care of? Not long after birth, the child became jaundiced and had to be carried under the sun every day. Which family's wife ate and drank too much when she was pregnant and got diabetes? Which family's wife did not receive the love and care of her family after giving birth? She was neglected and suffered from postpartum depression. Chapter 2956. Thus, he was even more certain that he had to study this aspect of knowledge. Before the child was born, he had to study hard so that he wouldn't be flustered when the child came into this world. Mu Yaja flipped open a page of the book and began to read it seriously. Naturally, he started with the knowledge of pregnancy. She did not know how long she had been looking at it, but she heard Yu's devilish laughter next to her ear. "Daddy, what are you secretly reading?" Mu Yaja was shocked. He was so focused that he didn't hear Yu's footsteps when the door to the study was pushed open. He slammed the book shut and turned his head. He saw Yu standing by the side with an evil expression, laughing secretly at him. Yu glanced at the spine of the book lightly. She covered her mouth and laughed secretly. "So Daddy is studying about pregnancy. Very good, not bad, not bad." As she said this, the little girl patted him on the shoulder and said seriously, "But why do I feel like you're doing something bad? You look like you're guilty." Mu Yaja snorted coldly without batting an eyelid. However, his burning ears betrayed him. Yu saw this and laughed even more. "Daddy, there's nothing to be shy about. It's good to study hard. A qualified father starts off as a stay-at-home dad." "Get lost." Mu Yaja was furious. Yu turned and ran away. Mu Yaja angrily glanced at his retreating figure. He picked up his teacup and took a sip of tea. However, through the door, she could hear Yu running into the living room and yelling, "Mommy, I'm here. Mommy, I just saw Daddy secretly reading The Complete Knowledge of Pregnancy in the study." Oofed. Mu Yaja was caught off guard and spat out a mouthful of tea on the book. He didn't have time to wipe the tea stains off before he guiltily hid the book in the drawer. After a while, Yu and Xiao Yichen held Yin Shishi's hand and entered the study. Seeing this, Mu Yaja glared fiercely at Yu. However, the little boy had a sly smile. He glanced at the table and teased, "Ah, Daddy, you're so fast. You secretly hid the book." Xiao Yichen also teased him. "Daddy, study hard. We're not at home, and Daddy didn't go out to play. You're reading obediently at home. Daddy must be trying to learn about pregnancy so that he can be by Mommy's side. Daddy, you're too sneaky's way. You're really unscrupulous in order to please Mommy." The two little lads echoed each other, and Mu Yaja's face grew increasingly hot. He clenched his fists, cleared his throat sternly, and chided them in a low voice. "Stop fooling around." Yin Shishi pursed her lips and smiled. She asked, "What are you reading?" "Nothing. I just heard you say that you were reading." "I wasn't." Mu Yaja stood up immediately and walked to her side with a stiff expression. He frowned and said, "Don't listen to the two children. We're not fooling around. Daddy, reading books isn't something to be ashamed of. You're not reading erotic magazines behind Mommy's back." Before Yu could finish speaking, Xiaoyichen tugged at his sleeve curiously. Yu, what's an erotic magazine?" Yin Shirshir choked on her saliva. Mu Yaja's expression darkened. Chapter 2957. Yu and Xiaoyichen looked at each other. When Mu Yaja wasn't paying attention, they secretly made funny faces at him and stuck out their tongues. The two little lads held hands and left. Mu Yaja was satisfied. He turned around and helped Yin Shirshir to the table. The latter asked curiously, "What were you looking at?" Yu was making a lot of noise just now. I didn't hear it clearly. No. Nothing. Tell me. The more he tried to hide it, the more curious she was. Her appetite was whetted, and she looked like she wouldn't give up until she got to the bottom of it. Mu Yaja frowned and suddenly thought of something. He opened the drawer, took out one of the books and passed it to her. Yin Shirshir was stunned for a moment. It was just a book that she couldn't see. How could she read the words with her fingers? She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she hit him. "Hey, are you doing this on purpose? Are you bullying me because I can't see?" "You call this bullying?" Mu Yaja suddenly circled in front of her, grabbed her hands, and inched closer to her suggestively. "Then should I show you what real bullying is?" Yin Shirshir's face instantly heated up. He held her tightly, not allowing her to retreat. In the darkness before her eyes, suddenly, the man's unique fragrance brushed against her face. In the next second, his hot breath covered her red lips. The man squatted in front of her, pinched her chin, and kissed her gently. In the corridor, Yu suddenly thought of something. A sly look flashed across her eyes and she stopped in her tracks. "You." Just as Xiaoyichen was puzzled, Yu put up her index finger and shushed her. She tiptoed around and walked towards the door of the study. The two little guys sneaked to the unlatched door, only to see Mu Yaja kissing Yin Shirshir in the study. They were entangled and reluctant to part with each other. Xiaoyichen was the most shy. She quickly covered her eyes with her hands and didn't dare to look any longer. Yu, on the other hand, was watching with great interest. Xiaoyichen couldn't stand it anymore. She hurriedly pulled him aside and said with a red face, Yu, you're so naughty. How dare you peek at Daddy and Mommy kissing? If Daddy finds out, he's going to be angry. If you and I don't say anything, how will Daddy find out? Yu said matter-of-factly. Daddy was so immersed in kissing that he didn't notice us. Daddy's a little. Littlechen also found it strange. It's said that pregnancy makes a woman stupid for 3 years, but why do I feel that Daddy has become stupid when Mommy is pregnant? Pfft. Yu laughed helplessly. It's not that Daddy has become dumb. It's just that Daddy has become more cautious. He has to double-check everything and consider everything for Mommy's sake no matter what he does. After all, Mommy has a high status outside the family. She's a precious treasure. If Daddy isn't careful, I won't let him off. That's true. Xiaoyichen's heart ached for Mu Yaja for half a second. Yu wanted to sneak into the study to observe, but Xiaoyichen hurriedly pulled him back. Don't go. Let Daddy and Mommy have some alone time. Let's go have some alone time too. Who wants to have some alone time with you? Yu glanced at him in disdain. I'm not going to hang out with you. As he said this, he snorted arrogantly and turned to enter the bedroom. Xiaoyichen followed behind and shook his head helplessly. His smile was full of doting as an older brother. Chapter 2958. But then again, he was already used to Yu's tsundere nature. He followed her into the bedroom and closed the door. In the study, Yin Shirshir was a little absent-minded. After she couldn't see, her hearing had become shockingly sharp. Hence, she could hear the two little munchkins whispering in the corridor. She couldn't help but fidget and kept pushing away Mu Yaja's advances. She asked worriedly, Is the child eavesdropping outside? No. Mu Yaja grabbed her hand and wanted to kiss her again. Yin Shirshir turned her head away and said coquettishly, I heard it. Yu is really naughty. She's always pulling Xiaoyichen to peek at us from outside the door. After all, she has done this before. Don't you know how to discipline her? Is this child someone I can discipline? Muyaja retorted. Not only is she naughty, she's also very smart. You can't discipline her. You on the other hand. Muyaja changed the topic. Looking down at her face, he smiled and said, My good wife, don't be distracted. As he said that, he pecked the corner of her lips gently and said a little aggrievedly, I haven't had sex for more than a month. Even when we're kissing, you're distracted. After saying that, his handsome brows furrowed slightly, as though he wanted to say something but didn't want to. Yin Shershur was amused by his aggrieved tone, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You sound so pitiful. Muyaja said sternly, You don't know how painful it is for a man to be abstinent. Yin Shershur was speechless. She wasn't a man, so how would she know what abstinence meant for a man? Especially when they slept on the same bed. Every time she laid in his arms and slept peacefully, he would lower his head and look at her peaceful sleeping face. It was as if her skin could be broken by the wind. It was white and flawless. Her elegant eyebrows and dark red lips were everywhere to tempt him. Every time this happened, his lower abdomen tightened, as though he had accumulated a lot of strength. No matter how determined he was, it was as though his rationality was about to be demonized. Previously, many experienced people had told him about this matter. In the first 3 months and the second 3 months of a woman's pregnancy, they couldn't touch her. In other words, in the 4th month, as long as they were careful and didn't use too much force, there wouldn't be a problem. But Muyaja didn't dare to touch her. He always felt that she was too weak to stand up to a gust of wind. That thin and weak body, that bulging belly, and the fact that she was pregnant with a little guy in her belly, was already not easy enough. With such a thin waist, if he didn't grab it, he didn't know if it would collapse. How could he bear to touch her? It was already very difficult for her to be pregnant. After all, he had already confirmed that the little guy in her belly was a little princess. He was even more careful and cautious. He was full of anticipation for the arrival of the little princess. In terms of bed matters, he planned to endure it and did not dare to be too indulgent. Hence, Lu Jinyu half-jokingly dragged him out to have some fun. Someone else said, If you can't do it in bed, there are always other ways to do it. That person inexplicably leaned close to his ear and said, For example, the mouth can do it too. Hee. This person was Jiangshen. He always came up with a lot of bad ideas. Muyaja glared at him and chased him aside. How dare you criticize your sister-in-law? You don't want next month's bonus anymore. Chapter 29:59. Before he could finish speaking, Muyaja glared at him as if he was about to kill him. Jiangshen shut up at the right time. Lu Jinyu laughed out loud. Shen, don't tease boss. Don't you know? Boss is famous for being a blockhead and a slave to his wife. Look at how boss signed those billion-dollar contracts without batting an eyelid. But if sister-in-law's face gets sullen, boss will definitely be in a hurry to coax her. It's said that many men are very tormented when their wives are pregnant. Those who can bear it will ask their wives to use other methods to resolve it. Those who can't bear it will cheat and have affairs at this time. However, boss is a slave to his wife, of the new era. It's only 10 months. Just grit your teeth and it'll pass just like that. As Lu Jinyu spoke, he said vividly in front of Muyaja, Shen, why don't we bring boss out to have some fun tonight? I know a place where the girls are not bad. Be careful, sister-in-law will come after you. Jiangshen smiled evilly and said, Boss, you have to hold on. You have to hold on until the last moment. You have to protect your integrity for sister-in-law. Humph. Muyaja pretended to be calm as he flipped open the financial report and said with a calm expression, It's only 10 months. Although he said it casually, when this person lay beside him at night, a certain man suddenly realized how long 10 months was. It was practically light years. What was the feeling of despair? That was when he thought about how he still had to endure for 6 months before he could unload the goods. Sometimes, when he had a reaction, even a cold shower could only temporarily soothe it. When he lay down on the bed and held her in his arms, he felt that indescribable feeling again. Where did he get so much energy from? It seemed that he had to think of a way to exhaust this excess energy. Hence, Muyaja decided to set up a gym at home. Every day, he would run for an hour before going to bed, and then do a set of barbells. With this thought in mind, he quickly put it into